Need a winter holiday escape? Forget your cares in Fiji. White sand beaches and scuba diving are calling. Your tropical paradise getaway is just one nonstop Fiji Airways flight away, with round-trip fares starting at $899 from LAX or SFO. Or check out great fares to Australia and New Zealand with seamless connections via Fiji. Book now at FijiAirways.com. From here to happiness, flying direct with Fiji Airways.
Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. It's episode 282. I am Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Hey, you know, it's the middle of December. Christmas is coming. It's coming. Well, for you anyway. I don't celebrate Christmas. You know, it's about me.
I'm actually having a hard time believing that it's the middle of December. It's absolutely wild to me. Like, I'm still stuck in early November.
I'm still feeling like we're in the middle of the pandemic 3 years ago. So time broke and never came back. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. You know, we're California boys, right? So it's where the weather doesn't change a whole lot, so you can get a little lost in that time of year, I think.
That is very true. However, for you, Brian, I know that the onset of Christmas season means revisiting a perennial for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's certain movies I have to watch every year. I mean, Christmas Vacation, you know, Die Hard, whatever. But the one that I absolutely love is It's a Wonderful Life. It's been one of my favorite movies since I was a kid. And well, how about for you? I mean, is this a movie that you are familiar with and watch, or?
Well, I think I've said to you before, like, I mean, I like it. It doesn't have the same level of connection to me, certainly that it does for you, but I absolutely appreciate it. And, you know, I would say probably Frank Capra's best movie. That's a tough one, actually, because I don't know. I like Mr. Smith too.
Yeah, I've rewatched that recently too, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a good movie. Let's rewatch this. And then when it ends, you're like, oh no, that's a great movie.
Yeah,
you almost forget. But I definitely think, certainly, I don't want to call it nostalgia, but just having been there for my entire life, I have a real connection to that film. And you know, we've I think we've mentioned it on the podcast before, but that was one of those things where it had this funny situation where the copywriter or whatever that's called, you know, there was some sort of snafu with that. So no one was technically a rights holder, or seemingly not a rights holder to that movie for a while. So it was airing all the time when we were kids. I mean, it would literally be on all day on multiple networks at the same time. Yeah. And so it was one of those things where it was almost became just true comfort food. I mean, if it was around Christmas time, you turn on the TV, it just felt comforting to have that movie there. And I think that also does speak to the fact that it's good. If it wasn't good, then you would be like, it'd be a nightmare flipping channels, and that's the only thing that's on. But the thing is it's one of those movies you can jump into any spot in it, and you can just happily cozy up with it. And so I have that from my youth. But then I think revisiting it as an adult, there was a couple of years maybe where I didn't watch it, and then you watch it again as an adult, and I was like, wow, this is so much richer than I even realized. I mean, there were experiences I hadn't had yet in my life. Yeah. And as a grown-up watching it, it becomes an entirely different movie, and if it's even possible, an even greater movie. So yeah, I mean, it is one of my beloved, not just Christmas movies, but movies for sure.
Well, as it happens, Brian,
yes,
this is the perfect episode for you to be co-hosting with me.
Why is that?
Co-hosting, because joining us on the phone are Ray Nowosielski and his partner, in both business and life, Ruth Vaca, who are here to talk about their podcast, their brilliant new podcast, George Bailey Was Never Born. Hi, Ray. Hi, Ruth.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for being on. First of all, I have to say, longtime listeners will know that Ray and I go way, way back. In fact, I realized that Brian, I've known Ray about 2 weeks longer than I've known you.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it pretty much times out where 2 to 3 weeks. So technically, Brian, Ray outranks you in my life.
I was going to say, like, do we have to go out in the parking lot and settle this? Fight for Zacky's affections?
No, see, the depth of your friendship with Brian, as I've experienced through this show, led me to believe that you guys were like old high school pals or something to that effect. But no, eh?
That is funny, yeah. Because Ray, you and I, we went to Columbia College together, and truly, this is the largest film school in the Midwest, and with not exaggerating, we were friends from day one at Columbia College.
That is so sweet. I want to see that. I want to see that flashback right now. Like you guys meeting each other.
It was literally like, I remember so distinctly. It was like, hey, you like Kevin Smith movies? I like Kevin Smith movies.
Oh, and then in your era, Kevin Smith was everything. I mean, it was
That's
like,
right.
it was with the cool kids who actually like knew what was up in filmmaking. Like,
you're right. It was like back then it was like Tarantino and Kevin Smith were like the guiding lights,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, Ray, you and I, we watched Dogma together. Remember that? That was fall of '99.
Yeah. How do you feel his films have held up? Would you still call yourself a Kevin Smith fan?
I think Brian and I, we talk about this often, don't we, Brian?
Yeah.
But like Kevin Smith, I will always appreciate what I got from him at a specific time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really I don't have the same level of like, oh, I got to watch his new thing. But I will say, and I think Brian, you felt the same way when we watched Clerks 3. I was like, damned if that movie didn't really hit me right in the feels.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, those characters are just, he is completely nailed those characters throughout the years, and whenever they return, you can tell there's like a real passion coming from him. Like they're extensions of him, and I think you can feel that, and I think that's what makes those movies stand out.
Yes, and just a couple days ago, I was watching this new documentary called "A Disturbance in the Force," which is about the making of the Star Wars Holiday Special. And I'm like, gee, I wonder if there he is, Kevin Smith. It's like he doesn't even need to make movies. He has a perennial place as talking head in pop culture documentary.
Yeah. Didn't you say your kid said that one time? He wasn't familiar with who Kevin Smith was, but you were watching something retrospective on something, and Kevin Smith was a talking head, and he was like, "Dad, he's in everything."
But he's a case where, like, when the cred from Clerks and then maybe Chasing Amy was that he was sort of this indie art darling, and I don't think the art gets associated with him really so much anymore.
I think that's true. Yeah. He's found his niche, and he seems to be very comfortably residing within that niche. So I guess God bless, right?
I have to say,
sure.
I'm a huge fan of Kevin Smith, and I'll watch like anything he makes, even if it's bad, right? Or like recent or whatever. But I don't know if you guys or how you feel about the one that he made based off the Waco, Texas situation. What's it called? Red State?
Red State, yeah.
Red State, yeah.
I love that film, and I think it is so underrated, and I think it's such an interesting move for Kevin Smith, and I wish he would have gone more that way, to be honest, because I think we all have eras in our lifetime where we it's like there's a reason why Picasso had so many phases, right? There was the blue period, the whatever period. It's like I feel like Kevin Smith lived his Mallrats, Clerks era period, and he clearly kind of wanted to move on and had more interesting things to say. And he made that movie, and I felt like people were just like missing that other commentary about 20-year-olds doing like funny, irresponsible things or having witty conversations with each other. But I gotta say, Red State, I'm a fan. I don't know. It's one of my favorite Kevin Smith films, and I think it's super underrated. It's a sophisticated film.
I would like to see more like that from him, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, he sort of then quickly pivoted into like his trauma phase, with like yoga hosers and things like that, where it's like Nazi sausage people and,
and the like, walrus one, Tusk.
Right, Tusk.
Yeah. And that was kind of in the vibe of Chasing Amy, was this recognition that after Mallrats, he was losing some of that cred and that artist thing. So his characters were all about like, going where the dick jokes are, because that's where the comic sales are and stuff. But yeah, I'd really like to see him go, like you said, go more in that direction. But there's a bunch of directors that like, I want to just see them do these three, this set of films that they did that I thought they do better than anybody. And I want to just see them do that over and over. And that's not fair.
It is funny that Ray, that you and we watched Dogma, and I was thinking about how that movie is like impossible to find now because of the Weinstein of it all, and it's like I'm definitely feeling that, man. I wish I could rewatch Dogma. I was literally just a couple days ago I was thinking that.
Wait a minute, did you not save your DVDs from the 90s and 2000s? Because Ray did, and we have it.
Yeah, well, I did not get Dogma when it came out for whatever reason, and then I just kind of missed that window because now it's going for like a car payment on eBay and stuff, and I'm like,
really, Ray, that's how we're going to pay our mortgage.
Yeah, it might.
Send us the list, Zachy, of the movies you can't find anymore.
And it's funny because I've got a decent collection of physical media, but there's like one or two things that I just kind of pass me by, and those are the things that are now out of reach. Yeah. But that said, let's talk about your new project now. Again, as you heard from the lead-in, we're obviously certainly for Brian, It's a Wonderful Life is a lifetime love. But Brian's not alone. I mean, this is a movie that is deeply, deeply baked into really the fiber of this country. And so, talk about the journey towards this podcast and what it's about. I think our listeners would be really interested in that.
Yeah, I'm a natural contrarian, and there's something about this movie that spoke to me because it is so baked into American culture that if you're a certain kind of American, you don't even want to bother to see it anymore, or maybe you've only seen it in clips at Aunt Linda's house over the holidays, and you feel you've got it, and it never really blew you away. And then there's people who feel like they got a gut punch the first time they watch it through all the way, and they're like, oh my God, this is revelatory, it's about humanity, it's about politics. It's about who we were and who we could be again. And so it was that kind of hand-wavy, eye-rolly aspect of it that made me want to take this thing that a lot of people consider lame and try to see if I couldn't make those people see it as cool. And I find it interesting because, when we were about to head to film school, they started doing these American Film Institute top 100 lists, and they survey like 40,000 both in the film industry and just like icons of American life. So it was kind of a fair way to assess what was, seen as the really great movies among the true film fans at the time. And, it got eventually voted 11th greatest movie ever out of America. 8th greatest love story, 3rd greatest fantasy movie, number 1 most inspiring of all time. And yet it seems like for I'd almost call them hipsters or a certain kind of film fan, this movie never took its place like alongside Citizen Kane or Vertigo or The Godfather, like in the cool club. And I would just have these conversations with people who were being dismissive about it. And I'd suggest they watch it not during the holidays. Just watch it like a regular movie in the spring or something, because I thought they would have a different experience. But every conversation I ever had about this movie ended up amongst people who understood it and loved it, ended up going to all these places that I think get to the American character. So that's what I wanted to kind of explore.
So I need to jump in here for a second because just to give you a little background on myself, I also studied film production and management and all of that. So when Ray and I met, we bonded over our love of films. And something that I noticed that Ray would do that I've never seen anyone do, and I think, Brian, we touched on this a little bit, is that Ray has perennial movies that he watches. And I remember, for example, let's say, wanting to watch oh god, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of a, like, name any movie, like some random movie, right, like in March or something, and Ray would be like, oh no, that is a fall movie. And it's like excuse me, oh, like Good Will Hunting, perfect example. Okay, like I can watch Good Will Hunting any time of year, but Ray is not going to watch it anytime outside of August and December. Like that's his window of opportunity. And so I noticed that the one movie Ray would watch out of season would be It's a Wonderful Life. Wow. And I thought that was really interesting because, like many Americans, I grew up passively watching that on the TV because it would run nonstop. And it would run nonstop just like A Christmas Story, right? And as somebody who enjoys films, I think I'm still in the window of rarity where I'm okay with watching black and white films, especially as a young person. I mean, ask a young person today the last time they've seen a black and white film on purpose, and they will not, right? Like they haven't, and they will not.
Or it's limited to certain ones, like Casablanca. Like the ones that's like, oh yeah, of course. Well, that's a classic, but it doesn't go much further. Yeah.
And so I thought it was really interesting that Ray would just almost like, for me, watch this movie too often. And so, a couple years later, I'm just like, what is it with you in this movie? And, every time he would watch it, it was like being in that show where they give the commentary, the 5,000. What was that awesome show? I used to watch that all the time. It was like the little robot. They're in a theater and they're just talking about the movie.
Mystery Science Theater.
Yes. So watching movies with me and Ray is a little bit like that. And so with this one, he would just, it's this about Jimmy Stewart or this or Mr. Potter, whatever. And I'm just like, what in the analyzation is happening? Like, you are obsessed with this movie. Like, it had never occurred to me to pay that much attention to this film. So throughout my relationship with Ray, I have paid more attention to the film. It is still not my favorite movie, but it is his favorite movie. And I totally understand. It is so on brand with Ray. If you know anything about Ray, is that he is kind of like a two-person in one body personality. Like he's like he's either writing about war crimes and getting threatened by the CIA, or he is like watching Dawson's Creek in fall, like it's very and people don't know about this. And so after
and still getting threatened by the CIA.
Yes.
Yeah, they called me about this project. They were like, you're getting into some stuff. We just can't have you going, George.
Yeah, they're like, we can't have you exposing that we live in Pottersville. Shut it down. At some point last year, we were like thinking about things to pitch, and Ray had an open, pitch situation with iHeart and things like that because he had a previously successful podcast on true crime, and I just looked at him and I just straight up told him, listen, you got to do something light for people like me, and also for people who don't know that other side of you. You can't just brand yourself your entire life as a serious journalist. I mean, respect to that, but like, you cannot suppress this other super fun, light, analytical, like obsessed with humanity and society part of you. And so he literally that night pitched me this podcast, and I was like, see, you've already been thinking about it. You've been thinking about this for 25 years. And so that's really how when he decided to pitch it, but Ray had thought about making this podcast or a film or that. You could tell that in his head, he had already written out these 10 episodes. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And, I was thinking, it's very possible. It's hard for me to understand, but we come from the generation where this was, like I said, like available to us ad nauseum almost. But there could be a lot of people listening right now that don't even know what this movie's about. And so I was wondering if you guys could give like a brief sort of a synopsis of the movie, and then also explain then what you're taking that film, what your approach was to this series that you've created.
I think it's ultimately about every individual having value, and that and it's sort of about this sliding doors butterfly effect concept, that as much as we may feel like losers at times in our life, that a series of small acts of kindness done consistently over your life that you may think have had no value have in fact rippled through your timeline and made a huge difference. And that point is made through the life of an everyman, but a heroic in his own way everyman named George Bailey, who does not have the benefits of a lot of what current society deems important. He's not famous. He's not powerful. He's always struggling for the next paycheck. And like a lot of people in our society, because of that, he feels like a loser, and he's not able to kind of recognize the friends he has around him, the family he has around him, and it's a very almost narcissistic payoff for him, because in order for him to learn that he's had a wonderful life, he needs to be shown how many people in his community are doing so much better because of those small acts of kindness, and because he was willing to stand up to the ultra-capitalist Mr. Potter. So I'm sure you could give a better summary. I'm like too in the weeds.
I feel like it's a little. I think it's a little bit of like a reversed Christmas Carol. You know, like Jimmy Stewart isn't Scrooge, but like he gets the same treatment, right? He gets to see what life would be without him, and so you get like the difference between Bailey and Scrooge is that people actually like Bailey, and Bailey did amazing things, and you know he's
the Cratchit. He's the Bob Cratchit, but he fights back.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so that's really interesting to me. I told Ray, I'm like, oh, this is just a remake of A Christmas Carol in some ways, but put in modern society and putting social issues in it that are still relevant today. And A Christmas Carol also does the same thing, right? Like we're still dealing with horrible bosses like that, and overtime hours unpaid, and you know things like that. So I feel like it's a evergreen topic that gets rebooted every couple of years or decades, but there's something about It's a Wonderful Life that when that version of it came out, it just really penetrated in certain generations. I don't think it is going to ever affect people younger than millennials the same way, because as I mentioned, I don't think they can focus on black and white films. But if you turned that thing into color or rebooted it somehow, I think it would garnish a whole new generation. But I think for us millennials who went home for break every Christmas or whatever, we're helping our parents decorate or just hanging out on a very cold winter day or whatever, we couldn't help but watch that film, because back in the day there weren't all these streaming services, and it would just play nonstop, you know, on the major basic cable channels that your parents would have on.
Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
Every day, my company gets scam phishing emails trying to get money or sensitive info. I wanted to protect my employees and my clients, so I checked out CISA's Secure Our World. They've got simple ways we can protect our businesses from online threats. First, teach employees to recognize and report phishing. Next, require strong passwords plus multi-factor authentication. And finally, turn on automatic updates for your business software. To learn more, go to CISA at cisa.gov/Secure Our World.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was thinking about, I'm like playing the film in my mind as you're talking about it. And I would be interested to talk to someone, Gen Z or whoever, if they watched it, because I know for me, there are some black and white movies that I feel like, oh, this is good, but you almost need to apologize for its pace when you're recommending it to someone, or you're like, well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like this, it's of its time, but just try to see through that and see what the nugget, the kernel at the middle that makes this important to me. But with this movie, I find it has an astonishingly modern pace to it. You know, it doesn't lag. Like every scene leads into, there's always like some sort of conflict coming up, and James Stewart, whatever, like he is just so damn likable. And it could err on the side of naggy or whiny, with all the things that he endures, but he's just so like lovable and affable, and maybe it's me thinking, but like relatable. And so you do understand his anguish when it happens, and then when everything pays off at the end. I mean, I don't think I've ever watched it and not teared up at the end, because it's just so I just find it's one of those movies that just, like Citizen Kane, where people are like, oh wow, I expected this to be slow, but this moves at a modern pace in many ways, and that's why people hail it as one of the best films of all time. But I think this movie should be included in that conversation, where it's so ahead of its time in terms of storytelling, pace, whatever. I think there's still that kernel in there that I think everyone can relate to and feel emotional about in this day, in 2023. And
so, Brian, is the last scene is that your favorite? Because I asked 200 different people over the last year for their favorite scene, and I think it says a lot about how you come to this movie.
Gosh, that's so. It probably has changed over the years. I hate to be so like basic or whatever, but yeah, like there's something so powerful about like the town coming in and what Mary has pulled together. You call that out in the podcast, like what a badass Mary is in this story, and like it almost you almost miss it, but it's like she's the one that really pulls things together so often. And yeah, like seeing a man having his whole life recontextualized, and then seeing how many, he was just lost. He was in a cloud, a fog, and then seeing all these people that are willing to come forward and help him in his time of need. I mean, there's just something so irresistible about that. But I also, I do, talking about coming back to it as an adult, there's that scene where he and Mary are about to go on their honeymoon, and there's, the run on the bank or whatever. And I'm like, oh, like you're just supposed to have your one happy moment, but then Mary is just like, screw it, take our money, like the way that she jumps in and they're like a partnership. I think that scene hits me a little bit different as an adult, and I see how powerful that moment is as well.
I think what you just described reminds you as the viewer, like the love that these two characters have for each other. Like there's something about them that really makes them soulmates in this weird way, right? Like only like someone who truly loves you and understands your drive and motivations and things, like only a woman who understands her partner that well would say, okay, take my honeymoon money.
Yeah.
I don't think there are a lot of partners or wives or whatever who would be a little salty about that and push it on their face over and over again. Like, oh, well, I hope so-and-so's enjoying their house this month because I could have gone on my honeymoon for a whole month for that. And I think that shows a sense of humanity and why those two were able to find support when they really needed it. Because at the end of the day, they sacrificed themselves a lot without even really thinking about it too much or holding it against anyone.
Right. Well, and with all those things in mind, I mean, because I like I said, I mean, yes, there, or you said there's the black and whiteness of it that could be sort of off-putting, but there's so many touchstone moments in this, like character moments that are just evergreen, I think. And so with that in mind, and this movie meaning so much, especially to you, Ray, like what is your approach then? Like, okay, I want to do a podcast series on this. Like what's the angle? I mean, did you have an angle immediately, or were you like, how can I figure out how to explore this film in a way that people would be interested hearing its exploration?
I'm just kind of a completist. I've got nerd data brain. So my process a little bit was that I'd noticed these interesting articles or YouTube videos or whatever over the last 20 years. Every Christmas, a few of them would make its way to me, and maybe David Mamet arguing it seems like a liberal film, but actually this is like conservative Reaganites' wet dream of America. And I'd be like, okay, there's a little conflict there. Could we unpack that? And there were a lot of those. Was Mary the real hero? Had been argued by a number of people, and I thought there was a lot of there. And then I found there were sort of these media takes. Like we got the person who wrote the short story that this was based on, Philip Van Doren Stern. His 3 granddaughters talked with us for the podcast, and they pointed out that it became so ubiquitous that she felt she couldn't name a popular television series up to, let's say, the year 2000 that hadn't at least done a Wonderful Life reference episode or a parody episode. And my thinking was those media properties in and of themselves were doing a take or a deconstruction of Wonderful Life, and what were they getting at and what were they drawing from. So kind of started there. We had 200 conversations. We drove to 6 small towns we were convinced likely had inspired Bedford Falls in some way, trying to find modern corollaries and see how they thought about this movie. You know, like instead of Ernie the taxi driver, you know, Jim the Uber driver. And then, you know, I learned documentary filmmaking from Barbara Koppel. I'm still very much I'm stealing from her school of thought. And the idea is you don't set out with like a script, you know, an agenda. You try to go in with a few good ideas and you let the thing come from the totality of what, you know, these conversations that you've had. And 10 themes like emerged, and I think we probably overstuffed these episodes. I'm imagining if you guys were being honest and I wasn't your friend, that might be a criticism, is like, there's a lot in these, you know? But we were trying to figure out, okay, wait a minute, that person's idea sort of springs to this counter idea, and that sort of takes us to this synthesis over here, and that's kind of how and as I thought, it went to a lot of really interesting places about America today, which is what I think I like about it.
I think a lot of Ray's hypotheses when he watched it with me for like a decade and a half, right? Like commentary or thoughts, I think they actually unraveled and were proven right as the podcast came along. Because even from the first phone calls that we did last year in January and February, drama ensued within the first phone call, and Ray was just like, "Oh my God, we already have drama," and we just literally did our first interview, and I thought, oh, I guess there is something there about this, like. This is similar to the movie already. Like, who would have thought?
So we were talking to this one small town, and we were talking to someone who was on the Chamber of Commerce. And like she said, it was our very first call, and this was supposed to be my non-controversial project.
Right, exactly.
And the guy says right off the bat, you know, this place paints itself in Bedford Falls, but it's Pottersville, and I don't want to be on the record. And I'm like, what the?
and the issues were valid, by the way, and incredibly relatable. And Ray and I were just like, how do we convince this guy to let us use this? I mean, this is juicy stuff, you know? But in a way, if we would have dug deeper into the issues that he didn't want out, maybe it would have changed maybe it would have made the podcast a little bit too serious or overly political, because it is essentially local politics going on there.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So can you talk about pitching? You pitched it to iHeart. Is it iHeartRadio? iHeart Podcasts, right? Were they on board right from the jump?
It was the easiest pitch I ever had. So we'd be remiss not to mention my co-creator is another guy known for some controversial stuff. He's Kurt Engfer, has had a great documentary career, but he really started out with 2 films associated with Michael Moore, Fahrenheit 9/11, Bowling for Columbine. And it's funny because I had mentioned that this might be a good one for us to pair on. And I had a feeling he's probably had a lot of people say such things to him. And he kind of goes, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll pitch it. If you get the money, let's see, you know, kind of thing. And I bring him into a pitch with iHeart. It's our very first pitch. And they were basically like, I mean, there was one hoop, which was like, get us a 10-episode synopsis. So we did. And then they were like, great, let's work on the deal. Let's sign the contract.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and when Ray said 10 episodes, I was like, really? I'm like, I thought they were only going to want like 6, you know, something very limited. I was like 10, but knowing Ray, he was like, can you believe it? It's only 10, because Ray can go on for, 50 episodes on anything. So I was like, wow, that's you're gonna have to practice self-restraint, sir. Like, we're gonna make this locked in 10 episodes.
May I ask you guys a question? Do you? I mentioned that there's this weird thing about it where it makes these top lists and it's universally known, and yet I don't feel like it's got that same cool factor, especially among like hardcore film fans. Do you think that's true, and why do you think that is?
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, and I think there's sort of a perception that it's schmaltzy.
That was exactly the word in my brain, Zachy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but it's just funny. I think we're probably sharing the same thought. Like, I think if you sat down and watched it, I think you'd be surprised. Like, if you had certain thoughts on it already, and then you'd go, "Oh, that was much better than I expected." But I think it comes across as very sappy, schmaltzy, Norman Rockwell times 10. Mm-hmm. And so that might be a little off-putting, like, oh, I get it, and I don't want to get a toothache while I watch this.
But, which is so funny because it's a movie we came to realize you don't really recognize it year to year, but it's a movie about an existential crisis and a suicide attempt. Mm-hmm. How can that be schmaltzy?
No,
it's a schmaltzy suicide movie.
Well, leave it to Jimmy Stewart to make it schmaltzy.
I know, and that's the thing that I talk about. Like, I always enjoyed it as a kid, but when I grew up, I was like, oh man, this movie's really rough. Like George has all these dreams and aspirations, and they are constantly getting squashed. And I was relating to that more as like a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, and feeling sort of like, oh, I guess I've had my Bailey moments too, but you admire him because he keeps persevering until he comes to that moment where it's just too much for him to bear. And that's when everyone comes through for him. Mm. And that might be that's what everyone's remembering. Like you were saying about favorite scene. I think when everyone thinks about it, it's like everyone's singing, at the end and in a room and yay.
I think that's what people remember. And if I can add another thought, I think sort of the angel of it all. Sure. People sort of like here. Let me put it this way: if this movie was made in the 1980s, George Bailey, would have used a DeLorean time machine. You know what I mean? If Back to the Future was made back then, Marty McFly would have ended up in the 50s because of an angel. The sensibilities shifted. And and Ray, I know how deeply you love Back to the Future. In fact, Ruth, first time I met you was at a screening of Back to the Future 13 years ago.
Can you believe it? And by the way, I just pitched Ray that his next podcast should be on Back to the Future. Because I don't know.
I was going to ask. I was like, Ray, when is the Back to the Future 10-episode podcast? So
thank you. When is it coming? He's actually thought about this, and I could see in his head that he's trying to figure out the angle on this. But I told him, I'm like, listen, there's something there. Like I think Ray has a really interesting way of finding sustenance in things like Back to the Future or It's a Wonderful Life that other people have maybe thought about, but didn't go like deep on or actually take serious. Does that make sense? So,
no, absolutely.
So Back to the Future, if you really think about it, it has a little bit of that It's a Wonderful Life aspect to it.
Very much so. Yeah.
Right? It has a Christmas Carol aspect to it, and it also has other things like social political commentary, right? Like the part 2 being Pottersville and things like that. And there is an episode that references all of this stuff that we're saying. So I'm excited for it, Ray. Back to the Future podcast. Here we go.
Well, by the way, I'm not sure we mentioned the name of the podcast yet, but it's called George Bailey Was Never Born. So if we did do the Back to the Future one, I think it would have to be called Marty McFly Was Never Born. And I think that
naturally
makes sense.
What if it was Doc Was Never Born? I mean, we need Doc because Doc has created the time machine. Without Doc, we can't go in and out of
Clarence.
time.
Clarence. That's right. That's 100%
right. I also wanted to touch on we were talking about existential crisis and things like that. If anyone's not really into the movie, but they're into connecting on a human level, episode 10 of George Bailey Was Never Born is actually about Ray and I and how
I love that episode, by the way.
Do you? Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. That's my favorite episode too. And not because it's about us, but because it's so relatable, I feel. And it's really refreshing for myself to have retrospective on how our lives reflected the film in so many ways. How I was George Bailey and Mary. Throughout the year, I was actually experiencing their characters without knowing it. And then randomly one day, Ray came up to me and said, "Hey, we're trying to figure out what episode 10 is about." And Kurt suggested that we actually make it about what we've been going through. And I was like, yes. Yes, and I actually am usually a no person on this matter because I don't like to share my personal struggle on social media, right? I have a boundary. I don't really want to be a victim of anything in front of people. But I chose to be welcoming to being vulnerable in this case because I thought, you know, for the first time in my life, I'm ready to be vulnerable and transparent about myself and my place in life. And for the first time in watching the movie, I related to the film, I think, in the way that Ray has always related, because I was living through it in a weird way.
Wow.
One of a million things that sprang from this movie was Groundhog Day. I mean, in some ways, or it was a light inspiration. And that was another one that Ruth and I connected over. And when we were lucky enough to get Danny Rubin, the screenwriter, for episode 10, and as we were struggling with things like finances and that making us question how much we were going to continue supporting each other's youthful dreams and such, I was able to use Danny as a little bit of a love letter in that moment to Ruth by introducing the screenwriter of this movie that when we were first dating had bonded us from across coasts in a long distance relationship. We'd watch that together.
That's so cool.
It's so cheesy, but it was cute.
Hey, that's the good stuff right there.
Yeah.
Well, the show is George Bailey Was Never Born. It's on all the podcast apps and things, wherever. All 10 episodes are there. And it is absolutely worth the deep dive. And I would say, honestly, I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, I've never seen the movie. And I'm like, you should watch the movie anyway, but I don't think you need to have seen the movie to appreciate what the podcast is doing.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And it's a wonderful production. I mean, it has original music by local talent here in Bloomington, Zachary Walter. And we have local voiceover talent playing the angel. I mean, there's a lot of really great qualities about this podcast. And I like to tell people that what's really cool about this podcast, and I told Ray when we were listening to edits, we were reviewing the episodes and re-editing and all of these things. And I told him, what's interesting about this podcast? Because there was some feedback about how people were trying to figure out what the purpose of the podcast was, or like how to put it together, because it's such an interesting way of looking into a film, just one specific movie and all of its, impressions on people and society and culture and pop culture specifically. And I told him, Ray, the thing about this podcast is that it sounds more like a book, or as if you were listening to a special fun documentary on TBS or CNN or something, doing a retrospect. And that's why I think the people who were test driving, listening to it, were a little bit confused or didn't know how to connect with it. So I like to tell people, don't think of it as a traditional podcast. It's really a listening experience. It's really almost like an ode to old-timey radio shows where they told you a whole story with a lot of dynamics with music and voiceover and interviews. And it's a really, I'm really proud of the podcast. I think it's a really original production, just in production speak. I think it's really cool. So
subscribe right now. George Bailey Was Never Born. Pause this show, switch, subscribe, come back to this show, hit play again.
And give us a 5-star review. Yeah.
I like it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. So we're going to take a short break, let our sponsors do the thing, and then we got lots more to discuss. But Ray is sticking around. Ruth, I know you need to jet, but I want to sincerely thank you for coming on with us. And of course, you are always welcome back here on the Movie Film Show.
Thank you so much for having us and all of your support. And this has been a blast.
Awesome. We will be back right after this.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry. We were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right. ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
And we are back. Brian is here. Ray is still here, which is nice. It's good that we're all here.
Still here. Ray is still here.
Oh, good. Good.
Ray, I was thinking it's so funny because I have so many fond memories of watching movies with you, talking about movies with you. And just the other day, I was watching Die Hard in the theater. They re-released that, and that was actually a lot of fun for me because first time seeing that in the theater. Number one, my wife came with me. She hasn't seen that in 20 years since back when we first got married. So that too was a lot of fun. But as I was watching it, I was remembering conversations you and I had back in the day about you made some remarkable examinations of Die Hard way before I was capable of such complicated thinking, and I was so appreciative of the stuff you said way back in the day because I was remembering it while watching the film now.
Because it's a deconstruction of the Macho Man action movie, but very much into the disguise of a Macho Man action movie, and it's set in a giant phallic symbol. And at one point, he's got to save himself by undoing the giant fire hose from his waist, and that's really, him embracing Holly Gennaro instead of Holly McClane and all that stuff. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah. And by the way, your conversation last week about a Home Alone 2, I would say Die Hard 2 is a good movie for the same reason Home Alone 2 is, which is that it's a remake masquerading as a sequel made by the exact same parties, and therefore you can't really say it's bad because it's the exact movie that you thought rose to classic level. So anyway,
it's you know what I remember. I was thinking about this. I remember your distaste for the third one. For the third Die Hard. I don't know if you dislike the whole movie, but specifically the aspect that John McClane is now separated from his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And watching Die Hard on the big screen, I was really like, Ray's right. At least that part of it, I don't like. I think it just is such a repudiation of what the first two movies do in terms of cementing their marriage.
That's the tricky part. We were talking about this, I think, with Last Jedi. That's the tricky part when you must do a sequel, because then you have to create some sort of complication. You have to. I think what I mentioned was, the creators of Friends didn't want to make any more episodes following the series finale because they're like, well, then we'll just have to undo stuff and make everyone's life unpleasant through contrived ways, and we don't want to do that. And so... yeah, it's like if you keep bringing McClane back, well, what's his issue? It's like, well, I guess now he's divorced, and that's why he started happy. And you're like, well, I can see that from the pure mechanical side of things, but it's like, I don't want that.
Yeah. I think there was a way to do movie 3 without having that element of the story. I don't see how essential it is other than just not having a role for Bonnie Bedelia. Then you just don't have her in it. But you know what I mean? When Die Hard with a Vengeance came, which I should say, I like the movie, but when it came out, I just took it at face value. But definitely you're like, well, no, the marriage is so crucial in both of those first two films that it really does feel like, why'd you do that?
Well, as every movie becomes sort of a franchise and an endless sequelization, I do think that comes up more and more. And you do need new challenges for your protagonist, and it needs to feel earned and all that good stuff. But don't make it so my experience of the first movie that started me on this journey is completely undone. That's just not what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Brian, did you go see Die Hard in the theater, or you're gonna pass on that?
I'd like to. I went yesterday. I saw Oppenheimer again because my brother hadn't seen it, and it's back in theaters for I think a week. And I was like, all right, this is it. We're going. We have to go. And I wanted to pop in just to see it. I just wanted to see it projected. But no, I haven't been able to carve out time for that. Just so many things I want to see right now.
I know it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, seeing it on the big screen. I mean, was it? You've seen it a million times, but I mean, is it one of those situations where you're like watching it again for the first time?
Well, one thing I'll say is you'll recall that you and I did a commentary track for that movie with Paul Shirey many moons ago, and that's sort of legendary, at least in our minds, because of all the technical issues. Because Paul was talking to us from Alaska, with an internet connection that was not cooperating. So I remember having to stop and restart and trying to resync. And this is before we were using the technology we use now, where it was relatively easy to resync. So that it reached a specific point in the film. And I think you know the exact point in the movie where we kept having to restart from.
Yeah.
So I got all
I will never think of anything else during that part of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. I was getting all twitchy and weird when the fire engines started.
Yeah,
that's right. No, but what occurred to me really, and it's not a revelation, is like, God, like Bruce Willis was such a star.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fact that he was nobody's first choice for that movie, and then you watch it now, 35 years later, and you're like, who else could have played John McClane?
Yeah.
And done what he did. I mean, it's just
who could do it now?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And that's sort of, again, it obviously, there was that period there where Bruce Willis was doing a lot of not great movies and people were dunking on him. And then you realize that the health issues that were the cause of that. And so now we're just sort of looking at it like, well, Bruce Willis's movie star period is over. And so we look at his career in toto and you're like, this guy, like there's a reason he was such a star.
Mm-hmm.
And it's plain to see right there, the fact that he was able to transition seamlessly from TV star to movie star. Die Hard was the perfect vehicle for him to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'd be remiss not to mention, by the way, in the big is Die Hard a Christmas movie debate that we unearthed a little piece of audio in our podcast where McTiernan essentially says he's watching It's a Wonderful Life, and he's trying to figure out how Capra was able to do the greatest takedown of cowboy capitalism in any movie and slip that to modern audiences. And he had this epiphany, because it's in a Christmas movie. And he decided to go ahead and apply Christmas to Die Hard. So there you go.
Amazing.
That was incredible. I remember hearing that, and I was like, wait, am I hearing this right? That's McTiernan? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. But that was my experience. Brian, have you seen anything recently worth mentioning?
I just want to mention a couple things, but just to piggyback on that, seeing older films in the theater, I got to see The Abyss on an IMAX screen.
Man, I'm so bummed I missed that.
For some reason, that movie popped back into my mind several months ago, and I was like, it's so hard to find in HD, right? They'd only ever had a DVD release.
That's
and I really wanted Federica to watch it, and I had to watch it through really weird means. I don't even remember how I watched it, like on an iPad or something. And she's like, maybe someday. But then when it was advertised that they're going to put out a 4K edition of this, like physical media, and they're going to put it in theaters for one day, I like immediately got on my laptop and bought the tickets. And oh my gosh, it was incredible. Like it looked so gorgeous on the big screen, and it was so cool to watch it again because it's a movie I like, but it's not one I've seen 100 times, so there's many things I remember, but there's other things that I don't remember as well. And to just sit down in a darkened room with amazing sound and amazing screen and rewatch this movie, frankly, it was amazing to watch it through Federica's eyes, because I think she went in with a little skepticism because I had been overhyping it for a couple weeks. And so she was like, okay, yep, Brian likes this movie, let's do this. It's there's like water and aliens or something. And but then to watch, midway through, she started gasping at moments, and then by the end, she started tearing up, and I was like, yeah, this movie, this is an absolute gem of a movie that I just somehow has slipped through the cracks. And I think it's definitely for people who've either seen it and don't remember it, or have never seen it. And like James Cameron, when this is, I think it is available now through streaming.
It's on digital. It's in my Vudu.
Yeah, and the physical release comes out in March, but this is absolutely something I would recommend people check out. Actually, now I want to get your two opinions on this. I saw the director's cut. That's what they showed in theaters. I think I might prefer the theatrical cut. I think it's good, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in there, but it almost played like episodically, and it went on a little long, and I felt like I was watching 3 episodes of a miniseries, maybe not even in the best way. Whereas the theatrical cut feels a little bit more concise and tight to me. But what's your opinions on that?
Well, speaking for myself, I'll say I'm not super familiar with the theatrical version because the director's one, that's the one I have more experience with. But I should say, even that I have not seen a ton of times. Last time I saw it was on DVD, probably about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute. So this, like, I'm planning to watch that soon, hopefully with my kids, and it's gonna be a virtually new experience for me.
Oh, that's perfect. What about you, Ray? What's your relationship with the movie?
Not too much. Probably about the same as Zachy described. And I will say that I do find that as much as people will talk, artists will talk smack about the studios or the network heads giving notes that result in these the non-director's cuts of these movies. I find that often that's a nice balance between where the artist wants to go full throttle into their director's cut versus let's pull it back a little bit here. I think those notes are actually helpful in many cases. So
I think if you're a fan of the film, it's cool then to see more. But the version that I dug up a couple months ago was the theatrical version, and I had a great experience with it. And then watching this longer version, I could feel a little bit of the, I wouldn't go so far as to say slog, but just like I was ready to kind of skip ahead a little bit and get to the meat. And that's not it almost feels like I'm saying the opposite of how I feel about the movie, which is what I think is so great about it is it's a real human story. And I think a lot of times these days you sort of get a type, you get a Chris Pratt type or a Vin Diesel type, right? And then you just push them through action scenarios, and it's really more about what's going on around them than them and how they're experiencing it. And I'd say this movie is the opposite. This movie is, you get to know these people, you know what they're like. There's a marriage in crisis. That's like the big centerpiece of the thing. And it's about them as they go through these things. It's always about them and how they're feeling and experiencing it and surviving it together. And I think that's why this movie still holds up as well as it does.
I think also, when it comes to James Cameron director's cuts, I think, and I can't speak to The Abyss, but at least as it pertains to Avatar and Aliens and T2, like, I think the extended versions are fine, but like, I don't think I don't find those essential.
Yeah.
Right. And on our show, we've done commentaries for T2 and Aliens, and, partially for time reasons, but also just, I think we're fine with we did the theatrical cuts,
Yeah. I found they're cool for me as a fan. And there's always like one or two things where you're like, oh, I wish he'd kept that.
Yeah.
Like a cool moment or something. But all of those scenes inserted, it felt a little blobby when I wish it had felt a little more tight. But that's having me just watched the theatrical thing. But I should also say, in the Abyss's case, it's a significant change to the ending, the director's cut, and I can appreciate that. But I still think I might side with the theatrical.
Well, the version of Terminator 2, anyway, that's been selected for inclusion in the National Film Registry, that's the theatrical cut. So let's see which version of The Abyss gets included if they ever get around to that.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention 2 more movies, but I saw December, the Todd Haynes movie on Netflix. Have you guys seen this?
No, I have got a screener sitting outside, but I haven't watched it yet.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this is one of those funny things. I've listened to other podcasts where people have talked about it, and I think not everyone is aware that this is inspired by a real life news story, which was when we were growing up. I think it was the 90s, where there was a teacher in her like maybe late 30s or something seduced a student.
Mary Kay Letourneau.
Yeah. Well, I say seduced, but I mean, if you really want to get into it, raped, a
That's right.
13-year-old boy. But what's crazy is she ended up getting caught. She went to jail. She had his baby. And then when she got out and he was of age, they got married. They stayed together. And so this movie, which is fiction, not based on them, but I mean, all the details are there. Even the guy who plays the boy resembles the real life person. What it's about is you have this actress then played by Natalie Portman who's coming to visit them all these years later because they're going to make a movie about this news story. So she wants to follow along with the woman in this relationship and just spend time with her to try to get a beat on her. And man, I really like this movie. This is one of those things where, like, at the end of the year when you get those awards films, no matter what, they're always intriguing because they feel different than what you've sort of been watching for most of the year. But sometimes you're like, wow, that was different, and I like that. But then they sort of reveal themselves to be kind of vapor, after a couple days. Yes, it was different and it was intriguing in certain ways, but it didn't stick with me. This one stuck with me. I thought this one about this one for days afterward. And why I think that is it's not just well shot and it's not just well acted, and it's very well acted, but there's a lot of components to this. With the relationship, I mean, the boy, I mean, in this movie, he's probably in his 30s now, but him having, he's gone on years after this has happened, and to then rethink his whole life and what it's become with this actress now coming in and asking them questions again, and him having to confront things that maybe he's pushed down and not thought about all these years or tried to convince himself for a certain way. That itself is just an interesting movie. But then Natalie Portman's character as the actress and what she is doing, her methods, and what it's ultimately leading toward, and is it even worth it? It's a really, really rich, delicious movie, and the acting is incredible, and I definitely recommend it. I mean, this is available. I think it went straight to Netflix, and Netflix movies a lot of times can be sort of vapor, and sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways. But this one, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is a Netflix film because there's a lot here to sink your teeth into.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
I'm looking forward to watching it. I will say Netflix, around this time of year, they send all the swag and stuff. And I got this May December t-shirt. And I'm like, I can't. I'm not wearing that.
That is weird on so many levels.
What message are you sending? Yeah.
So many levels. I mean, what? Like, just walking around with something that says May December. What are people to think?
While I'm like teaching classes,
right?
Yeah.
So literally, because I get excited whenever I get clothing items. I think I said this before. I get sweatshirts and things like. I'm like, that's great. And then it's like, oh, what's this? May December, and it's like, Julianne, a picture of her on the back, and I'm like, well, okay, I can't wear this shirt. It's like last year I got a thing where it was for Glass Onion, and it has like all the names of the cast on the front. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I turn it on the back. It's just this hand with a raised middle finger. And I'm like, well, God damn it.
Right. Yeah. Taking your kids to Legoland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that one won't work. But I am looking forward to seeing the movie. So,
well, the last thing I checked out was another Netflix movie. So I saw Maestro. Written, directed, starring Bradley Cooper.
Now you saw this in the presence of Bradley Cooper.
Yes, this was one of those very cool things. Federica caught an email about this where they were doing a special screening at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood. And following the screening, Bradley Cooper was interviewed by Steven Spielberg in person there, because Spielberg produced this movie. And I mean, admittedly, that was the big impetus to get out of the house and go check this out. And this is a really interesting movie. It's another one that stayed with me for days, but I don't know that I'm still processing how I feel about it. I think what's interesting about it, and we've talked about it on this show, is when you're doing a biopic, particularly a musical biopic, Walk Hard has completely blown up that format. The template that all those movies used to follow, like young starry-eyed guy, and then he gets into drugs, and then he cheats on his wife, but then everything works out in the end. So
you don't want none of this, do we?
I think I do. By the way, hilarious Walk Hard if you haven't seen it.
Brilliant. Yep.
Ray, have you seen Walk Hard?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Love it. But, I think what a lot of the more artistic takes on, because biopics do follow that kind of, even the good ones, you're sort of like, okay, but I know the rollout of a human life. I like the ones they've been experimenting with where they take like one moment in this iconic person's life, and that lets you get into everything you really need to understand about them.
Kind of like Lincoln recently, with
Lincoln,
Spielberg. It was, and I go in thinking that I'm like, well, I want him as a boy, and I want to see how and you know what? But Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter thankfully covered all that for me, so I didn't have to.
Well, no, and Brian, I mean, you and I talked about Napoleon a few weeks ago, and that was kind of my critique. Was I would have preferred kind of a Lincoln-esque approach, where it's like, let's really drill down on this integral moment. And spend a few hours unpacking that instead of hopscotching over sort of a greatest hits package.
Yeah. Well, and I think Maestro then what it tries to do, is it doesn't necessarily focus on his career, but his marriage. And his marriage is the through line of this entire thing, which is really interesting, because I can't say I know a lot about Leonard Bernstein, other than the REM lyric. And, and from the movie Tar, I learned that he had a series that was for kids to introduce them to classical music. So I was kind of curious to learn about him, but really all that stuff's on the periphery of his relationship to his wife, Felicia. And I actually do think it's a pretty smart choice, but in doing that, there's a lot of jumping around that happens. Not like Napoleon. Napoleon was like the worst case scenario of that. But I will admit that it took me a second to get on this movie's wavelength. It doesn't hold your hand. You're kind of bouncing a little bit through time, and there's certain relationships that aren't explained. Not a complaint. You can read through the lines, but then certain things will happen between him and Felicia, and you'll have these like really juicy scenes. I mean, just the acting is off the charts in this movie. That's the highest compliment I can give this movie, is the acting is so good, especially Carey Mulligan. Like, she is ridiculously good in this movie, and she gives it the heart that it needs. And every scene she's in, you're just with her. But I found myself sometimes, the relationship is very complicated, and I wasn't quite sure I always understood why. I mean, he was attracted to men and women, and so that is a component that she has to deal with. But I kind of wanted to understand a little bit more about that. Like, was he like just a big flirt? Or there's a moment, it's even in the trailer, where she says, you just get ignited by people. You love people too much, or so much that sometimes it can be to your detriment. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I don't know that the movie gave me a real understanding of what that means, if he just loves too much, or if he's just a philanderer. Because some of the relationships that he has in this movie aren't really explored. It's just like, oh, he meets a cute guy, and then he's interested in this person. And I wish it because it's so close and it is so fascinating. And then the relationship between him and his wife as he goes through this is so fascinating. I found myself wanting just a little bit more understanding of all that. But like I said, I mean, performances are great. There's a scene where he's conducting a song, and they pretty much just do the whole thing live, and you're watching him do this, the London Symphony Orchestra in this huge cathedral. And it blew my hair back. I felt so lucky I got to see it in a theater, because it sounded like it moved me. I was really moved watching it. So I think at the end of the day, I almost maybe admired it more than I really loved it. But I have to say that there are some scenes in here that are just killer. I mean, just the acting, the drama. So there's a lot of good meaty stuff in here. I just kind of wish the whole thing overall had came together a little bit more for me in the end. But I'll be curious if you check it out. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, well, this one too. I've got the screener sitting there, and this one too. In terms of swag, I don't know what to do with. They sent me the vinyl LP of the soundtrack, which I'm like, all right. Can you send me the? You
don't have a turntable?
Yeah, I was like, can you send me the record player also?
Yeah, it feels like they'd send you like some sort of Cromley or whatever those are called. At least.
So this has been a weird year. I've gotten a lot of LPs because they sent a Barbie. I got that from Warner Brothers also. Yeah. So I guess TBD. We'll see if I have something to say the next time.
Cool. Well, what about you guys?
Yeah, Ray, are you feeling this one at all, or?
Based on, well, I mean, Brian, I always listen to y'all's reviews. In fact, I'm not going to see Napoleon based on prior episodes.
Sorry, Ridley.
There are movies I'm like on the fence on. Do I really need to go see this? Maybe. And then I will go ahead and spoil those movies by listening to your podcast, and then I'll make my decision. So, So
wow.
I wouldn't do that with something like Oppenheimer, where I'm like a dead set. I'm definitely, whatever, which was the best movie. I think I'm pretty basic. Oppenheimer was the best movie experience for me of the year. The Michael J. Fox documentary was the best doc. And the second I saw it, I was like, I think this is getting the Oscar. There's lots of different approaches to docs, so there's other stuff that might be of a higher quality in other sort of kind of non-traditional ways, but that one just was like, yep. And then Better Call Saul. I actually caught that entire series this year, so it feels like it all came out as one thing, because I tried a few different times, and that slow pace of the early seasons and this sense of like, where are we going? We already know what happens in Breaking Bad, so why do I care? And then I did whenever I get to one of those where it's been recommended a million times and I just can't seem to get through the first season, I've started to do a watch order where I Google top 10 episodes and then I watch them in the orders they came out, so that I get the 3 from season 1 I really need to see and the 2 from season 2. And then usually
that's interesting.
By like the second to last season, I'm completely hooked. And then when I finish the series, I go back and fill in. Gaps, so. But Better Call Saul might have been the best ending of all time for me on TV.
Oh man, so good,
right? yeah, but not exactly recent. So
no, well, I'm
the theaters that much anymore.
Well, you're not alone there, because that's that's the issue. Is that notwithstanding an Oppenheimer-esque event, which that's a phrase that would not have made sense in 2022,
right?
People aren't going to theaters, so that's kind of the issue. I mean, we talk about this is not anything particularly new, but I mean, I see it with my students where, they're just as fine watching a movie on their tablet. It's just the theatrical experience is not the motivating factor that it was. And I mean, again, my second kid, because this year I've gone to see a lot of these re-releases, right? Just going down the list. I saw Raiders, Return of the Jedi, Star Trek, The Dark Knight. I'm missing something. Die Hard. I feel like something else, but Back to the Future, and my oldest kid, he always comes with me because he enjoys, I think just through osmosis from me. My second one, he could love it. Like Dark Knight is like his favorite movie. He's like, no, I've seen it. I don't want to see it in the theater.
So interesting.
Yeah. It's very disappointing, frankly.
It's interesting though, coupling all those thoughts together. I saw, Oppenheimer was, like this humongous hit this year. Everybody felt compelled to go see it, obviously. I mean, it made $1 billion. But people aren't going to the movies as much, right? And so with all that in mind, I was looking at something on Instagram, and some page was having one of those brackets of like best director of all time. And it came down to Spielberg and Christopher Nolan, and Christopher Nolan won.
Yeah, I believe it.
I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I mean, that's, when I speak to Federica's siblings, friends who are a little bit younger, like they're all in on Nolan. Like Nolan's their guy.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. And I mean, I love Nolan. I really do feel like he's one of the few people that's doing that thing that only Spielberg could do at one point. You know, like I'm thankful there's someone else who's doing something as big and gargantuan, and he's able to take the chances he wants on his Tenets and his Oppenheimers and his whatnot. Like few people are able to do what he does. But it's crazy. Yeah. Like, yeah, as we march on, you know, it's Nolan's the guy.
I mean, Spielberg has been in his Papa Spielberg phase for the better part of a quarter century at this point.
Wow. When you put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, notwithstanding your occasional, you know, Indy 4 and you know, Ready Player One. I mean, he that's not his wheelhouse anymore.
Yep.
And he's making great movies, but it stands to reason it's not gonna they're not. I mean, Lincoln is not gonna appeal to like your high school kid. It'll be like, oh God, I got to watch this for social studies class. You know what I
mean? So true.
Yeah, Fabelmans was one of those. I think he used the term vapor, and
It vapor in terms of like it didn't last in people's consciousness.
Yeah, and in mine, I never thought about it again after that until like this moment.
I'm kind of with you. I think Brian was a little bit more laudatory of that movie.
You know, I would say about it, for me personally, I don't know that I would think of it as vapor, but I definitely don't think it's something that I'm going to go back to. Like, I thought it was interesting in a weird sort of way. It's the cinematic version of if I got to sit down with my favorite filmmaker, a guy, I mean, that means a whole lot to me, and he was to tell me his story. Inevitably, for me personally, that's going to mean something. But I can see that was when it came out. I was wondering for people who don't know that this is based on him or don't care, you know, like, does this movie mean anything? Like, do you have to be like hyper devoted, maybe even blindly devoted to this person to find meaning in it or to find that it something of substance in it? I still don't know. I can't separate myself from it. But
Nolan, I think, only wins versus Spielberg if you subscribe to the kind of Tarantino theory of that, like every piece of the body of work has to count. So if you've got these inconsistencies, that's gonna knock you down. And and the problem with that is that if you go all in and you're just about making a bunch of movies and you hope a lot of them are going to be great and a lot of them are and a few aren't, then you know your average is gonna fall a little bit.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And you know, you can point to like a Ridley Scott who's just like, you know, he gets a lot of at bats, and not every at bat is gonna, you know, he's not always gonna get on base. You know.
Yeah. Ruth's done with Wes Anderson movies. I checked out the recent one. And my thing is, if you've come through for me a bunch of times in a way that has really grabbed me, then I don't really care if it's your miss movie. I want to see you miss.
I think Brian's the same way, right? Because Brian is like ride or die M. Night Shyamalan.
I'm ride or die M. Night Shyamalan. I'm ride or die Wes Anderson. Yeah, there's just certain people. Sofia Coppola, like, I think she maybe has had more misses than hits, but I'm like, nope, you hit me so hard at the beginning. I'm always interested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
See, I'm ride or die Francis Coppola, and honestly, I mean seriously, like he's got that new whatever the hell Megalopolis, whatever it's called. I'm like, dude, I'm there opening day. I'll see it before opening day if I can. You know, doesn't matter if he directed Jack and shit. Or Jack / shit, I guess. You know, I'll be there because to me, this is me. I'm like 3 Godfathers and Apocalypse Now by me. For me, that's a lifetime of I will always watch whatever you have to make.
Yeah, Outsiders. I mean,
I mean that's the thing. I actually just recently revisited The Rainmaker, and I'm like, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Right. No, but we don't think of that as like a Coppola joint, right?
No.
But it is rock solid, man.
Yeah. I've been meaning to go through all of the Grisham movies again.
Yeah, I just purchased Pelican Brief on my Vudu, and I was in the same boat as you. I was like, I want to do like The Firm and the Pelican Brief. I actually, and this is like not available on digital, Runaway Jury, which I really liked.
Yeah.
That was a New Regency thing, I think.
Yep, that's when you say it immediately. I picture the poster on the wall.
Yeah, and and for whatever reason, it's not, that movie. Sorry, this is a tangent. That movie and Ransom with Mel Gibson.
Oh yeah,
are not available in any digital format, which is very weird to me because, like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it feels like they should just be out there, you know?
I had such a good theatrical experience with Ransom. That was one where the trailer got me excited, and then you go
Give me
into
back
that
my
movie
son!
and you just go, yeah.
I was like randomly telling people on the street, "Give me back my son,"
and they're like, "Ransom, dude."
That's such a weird. That's like, were you watching movies in 1996? Then you might understand this reference.
Yes. Yeah, it was ever present. Sorry, we
it
cut
really
you off,
was.
Ray.
No, but I mean, I'm like, well, I'd like to rewatch Ransom. I liked that movie, you know.
Yeah, wait, tell me about the memorable theater experience.
I think that was it. I just, I don't know, right age, right kind of 90s movie. It was really that case where the trailer, instead of ruining the whole, movie for me in advance, just really whet my appetite. Like I would have walked straight out of whatever movie I was seeing that trailer for and just straight over to the theater that was playing that movie and totally delivered. Just one of those where, that you want those ups and downs of that emotional manipulation journey. And it was what I was looking for.
It was Ron Howard, right?
Ron Howard. That's right.
That's right.
Ever dependable. Let's take another break, and we got some headlines to discuss.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
And we are back, and we got a couple headlines to discuss before we unpack a whole host of trailers. So, it feels, Brian, you and I were texting about this. It feels like this year has been particularly devastating in terms of the people that have left us from the industry. A lot of heavy hitters, and this name, I think, given how old he was, not particularly surprising, but nevertheless, it's still quite an impact crater that's been left behind. Norman Lear just died at 101 years old.
Wow.
So that's quite a run. And what's remarkable is he was active up until the very end.
Jimmy Kimmel was doing those specials with him.
That's right.
Where they were recasting some of his shows and doing classic episodes, like reinterpretations of them. It's pretty amazing.
Now, I would imagine that a lot of people listening don't know the name Norman Lear.
Yeah, and
Right?
I'll admit I'm more familiar with his work, like the resume, than I am with a lot of his actual work. I just know the legendary output he's had, but I didn't really grow up watching All in the Family or the Jeffersons or those shows.
Those were shows that were really just woven into my childhood. Like not just All in the Family. My parents loved All in the Family. They loved Sanford and Sons. So I used to watch it through them. The Jeffersons, Different Strokes, Facts of Life, 227. Good Times, Maude. I mean, it's like 70s and 80s iconography sprang from him, right? So much of just what we think of as like what a multicam sitcom looks like.
Right.
It's a result of the Norman Lear template.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and amazing you're lucky if you have one show that hits, and then you're lucky if you have a second show that you can actually, follow up with your hit with another hit. But as you listed all those, it's like, I know all of those shows and I know they're all legendary. It's incredible, the output.
Yeah. Especially when you look at like All in the Family and all the things that sprang from that. Because that led to the Jeffersons. It also led to Maude, which led to Good Times. And, these were shows that, again, individually you say, well, that's a big hit. And then you realize, it's actually part of this sort of extended universe, the Lear cinematic universe. Really remarkable. And it is a cliche at this point, but like you could not make those shows today.
Right.
Well, that's my whole take on Lear is like there were these 3 big hit sitcoms in the 1970s that completely changed TV forever. And every show either traces back to the Mary Tyler Moore School and the writers that came out of that and did Taxi and then Cheers and you got Frasier, and then you got like the Larry Gelbart MASH school and then you got the Norman Lear school. Now, my only thing as we analyze that is like, I don't know who continued to carry on the Norman Lear school.
Nobody.
Yeah. And I don't know why you couldn't do that now in our divided country. Something similar where you're hearing both sides on a weekly basis kind of give their take.
That's
so
the
way we can digest.
Right? I mean, this is a really good point, right? Because you look at a show like All in the Family, which tackled bigotry and a lot of the hot button stuff, which is still prevalent today. And yet it was a show that people, regardless of their political persuasion, came together and watched. And right. And that's fascinating. I mean, the we're talking about All in the Family. That was clearly, the show was a critique of Archie Bunker and his bigotry. It was not on his side. And yet it created a framework in which people who maybe leaned more towards Archie Bunker than Meathead, felt welcomed in, right? I find that interesting.
Yeah.
And that show, even as it was a critique of that kind of bigotry, I don't think it could exist now because I think people wouldn't get the joke.
So people would be deeply uncomfortable with it. I think the Connors tried to do it a little bit. But there's too many landmines. The idea was that, like you pointed out, Archie Bunker became the hero to many, many people. And I think maybe that was a cautionary tale of like, I don't know if we can do these where we're, people will just not follow the message that we created this character in order to message them.
No, I think it's true. And even something like Good Times, which, it's funny because when you read about that show and how the reason John Amos left the show was he was like, it started out as being a portrait of this, black family that's dealing with difficult economic circumstances, and then it just became sort of it's the Dynamite show, and it's Jimmy J.J. Walker, being clownish, and sort of those dynamics that these types of shows had to navigate. And yet, my point is, decades later, certainly for the people who watched them, they remain very meaningful. I mean, Good Times, which my understanding is that there is a sequel series in development right now that Norman Lear was involved with. It's going to be on Netflix. I think it's animated, but it's meant to be like Good Times: The Next Generation. Still,
Well, if I may shoehorn in a Wonderful Life reference in our podcast, George Bailey Was Never Born, episode 6, The George Bailey Generation, which weirdly is the most listened to episode because it caught fire without any advertisement on YouTube. Whatever that algorithm was, sent people to that episode alone. But anyway, we looked at the changing generations from the greatest gen to the boomers and then the millennials. through the lens of kind of George Bailey. And so what we noticed was that we thought George Bailey circa 1945 was like maybe the definitive fictional representative of the greatest gen at around their late 30s. But by 1975 or 74 might be a better year to reference, because that's the year Wonderful Life drops in the public domain and starts to catch on with Americans of that era. The number one greatest generation fictional representative would be Archie Bunker, and talk about two very different guys.
Wow.
and we ultimately like raised the question of, well, who really, if America somewhat sold out to the Potters, or we lost to the Potters over the years, then like who sold us out? And you look at George Bailey becoming Archie Bunker, and that seems to point to the greatest generation. But I think there's kind of an argument that Meathead and Rob Reiner's generation was actually the one that sold us to the Potters. But anyway, that's a little outside the purview of your show.
that's the good stuff. Wow. And everything's connected because when we're talking about All in the Family, I mean the theme song, the whole "Those Were the Days." That's it's ironic, right? That's the point. The song is meant to be ironic, and a lot of people miss the irony
because it's calling for a pre-Franklin Delano Roosevelt era, right?
Yes.
Can we get back to that, which we ended up doing? I think ultimately.
And didn't they like rip that off from the opening of Family Guy?
Yes, I looked into it, and you're correct about that.
The other thought I had is
says yes.
we had those live in front of a studio audience specials, right, where they did On the Family and the Jeffersons. They did a Good Times, I believe. They did Facts of Life, Different Strokes, and those are like amusing, right? I didn't see all of them. I saw two of those specials, but the thought I had watching those, I was like, it really does feel like you can't replicate it. You can get these great actors. You can get Woody Harrelson, but he can't be Archie Bunker.
Right.
Right. Like I think the closest they came was Jamie Foxx playing George Jefferson, which was masterful. But everything, like it felt like cosplay,
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that speaks as much to the impact of those original actors, but also just, I think the moment doesn't exist anymore for shows like those to work in the same way.
Right.
I actually reached out to Norman Lear in the spring, hoping he might interview on this subject for the podcast.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, I didn't hear back, but boy, that would have been a fun conversation.
That would have been something. Yeah. And kind of frozen in time now that he's gone, So Norman Lear, a legend, he will be missed. Another loss, just as legendary, I think, and this one hit hard. Andre Brauer just died a few days ago as we're recording this. And I know, Brian, you recently went through Brooklyn Nine-Nine, right?
Yeah, this hit especially hard because he's so fresh in my mind, and that character is so freaking lovable. It's just... It was really hard to, it's a little unfair to him, but you're sort of projecting his character on him a little bit. And it was, really sad news to see this. The first time I ever saw Andre Brauer or really became aware of him was on Homicide. Yeah, which I need to check out.
So this is a show. So it's Homicide: Life on the Street. It aired on NBC in the 90s, and it's sort of like in between, the Law and Order of it all, and then on NBC you had NYPD Blue. I think it just sort of got squeezed out of the mainstream conversation, and yet somehow, it lasted for 7 seasons, and truly this is one of the greatest cop shows ever made.
Right? Is it David Simon?
David Simon,
yeah, before The Wire, yeah.
And it had a terrific cast. Ned Beatty was on it, and Belzer. In fact, Richard Belzer died in February of this year.
Wow.
And then Andre Brauer now. So this year is bookended by 2 of the Homicide cast passing away. And Brauer was one of these guys. You watch the first episode and you're like, oh, this guy is like, he's a star, He was so like Brian, I've talked before about Dennis Franz on NYPD,
Right.
Where you're like, this guy's just the heart and soul of the show. Well, that was Andre Brauer, And so obviously he went on to have this amazing career. Captain Holt on 9/9, and I mean he was in Frequency and The Mist and you name it. But it was like it was like you put him in, you're going to get a great performance.
Yeah.
In whatever he was in, and he was 61 years old. So there was, we had this sort of assumption, like, well, we're going to be hearing about Andre Brauer for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what really hits is just like all the many, many great performances that we're never going to get from him.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, he's just, absolutely. I mean, there always would have been something for him moving forward. And
I would tell people to watch Homicide. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, for whatever baffling reason, it's not available on any streaming service.
Oh, wow.
Not for purchase, not for anything. And you'd think so, but no. Yeah. And I've got my DVD set of the whole series from back in the day, which I'm grateful to have hung on to. But that's unfortunate because if ever a time to really see this act, and he was in his 30s, early 30s on this show, and just electric. The thing, and that show, man, I could talk your ear off about Homicide. Wow. Seriously, such a good show. I mean, Brian, I'll say this, and I don't say this lightly, it's The Wire good.
I mean, I just finished We Own This City, and I felt like what a gift that I get a little more of this. Yeah, okay. I don't know how, but I will try to seek it out.
I mean, it's the all the pieces of what led The Wire to be The Wire. You can see them. You can see the seeds being planted in Homicide.
Yeah,
Ray,
have you seen it?
So I may have seen an episode or two. I was thinking the only thing I have to kind of add to this part of the conversation is that I have produced a number of documentaries with the great Barbara Koppel, who's still sort of best known for her first film, Harlan County, USA, and she actually won her Directors Guild of America award for doing like the documentary episode of Homicide.
Oh, how interesting! Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I mean, it's interesting because most shows do eventually do their like documentary episode. It seems like and they're usually somewhat memorable. I know MASH did it. I think maybe first, but
I think you're right. Yeah,
but yeah,
ER had one, something similar. Mm-hmm. Homicide. It's an interesting one because again, it's not in the same lane, but it's on the same highway as NYPD.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And NYPD was kind of sexier, literally, and just because it was more in the conversation. So Homicide just always was kind of like it got overlooked,
mm-hmm.
but it had just enough viewers to keep going for 7 seasons.
Right.
And by the end, I think in the last season. I think maybe the last, maybe more, but Andre Brauer left and he was replaced by Giancarlo Esposito. So I consider that like a lateral move. Like he did all right,
Mm-hmm.
And that's good. But like about a year after that, the NBC did like a reunion movie, maybe 2 years. And one of their stipulations was, well, Andre Brauer has to be in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's again, this is just me sort of like putting this out into the wind. Somebody will listen. Like, make Homicide available. It's a crime that nobody can watch this via streaming platform.
And so, Brian, the only Brooklyn Nine-Nine episodes I've watched are the Halloween Hunt.
And
did every year, or is it Halloween Heist? Sorry.
Yeah.
But does the show overall like? Are there stronger seasons than others, or is it pretty solid straight through? What would you say?
I, for years, have had people being like, Brian, you will love this show. And I was like, I believe you. I don't know why. I was like, I get it. Like Andy Samberg. I like Andy Samberg a lot, actually. Lonely Island and everything. But I was like, nah, I get it. Like, it's like on Fox, right? And it's like a cop thing. And finally, my wife and I were looking for something to watch. We both had it recommended. And I absolutely adored it. Like it was one of those things. It has that magic where they come up with this ensemble that you absolutely love. And so no matter what the episode is about, you enjoy watching those people doing that thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those shows that kind of has it all. It has the humor, it has the heart, you know.
The essential thing to a TV show seems to be that you gotta kind of fantasize about wanting to kind of hang out with either that group or that place or that scenario.
That's well put. Very well put.
Well, there we go. So Andre Brauer gone at 61. He will be missed. Let's take another short break. We have a few upcoming movie trailers to go through. We've been remiss, Brian.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go down the list right after this.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal.
When you wake up well-rested on a great mattress, everything becomes clear.
I do have a favorite child.
Things you missed when you were tired finally reveal themselves.
I use memes as a coping mechanism.
It's Mattress Firm's once-a-year sale and clearance. Get up to 60% off select Sealy, plus a free adjustable base, all with free and fast delivery. Deals this big won't last long, so don't miss out. The right mattress matters. We'll find yours. Restrictions apply. See store or website for details.
And we are back, and hey, Brian, there's lots of stuff coming out, but I want to ask Ray because I can't remember, Ray. You and I, we watched Planet of the Apes together. I'm pretty sure I dragooned you into watching it.
100%.
That's my friend test. I'm like, if you're still around after this, then I think we can make this work.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you came over to visit my house. We watched Planet of the Apes, and after it ended, you were like, "Hey, put on the second one."
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay, all right, I'm going to keep you around." I think Brian had a similar experience, minus the "Hey, put on the second one."
Did we see it in the theater together?
We did. That was not the first time you'd seen it.
Okay,
yes, we did see it in the theater.
Yeah.
I can't remember when that was. When you saw it for it had to have been with me. I'm pretty sure.
I'm certain. Yeah. The theater one is the one that really stuck in my mind.
And it was packed to the gills. That place.
Yeah, everybody was so into it.
That was exciting. Anyway, so Planet of the Apes came back as a franchise. 12 years ago? That was Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Wow.
Crazy. And so you had this trilogy, which was generally well regarded. And when the Fox sale happened, where they were purchased by Disney, one of the brands that they said, we're buying Fox, not for the quality productions and, different types of movies, we just want franchises. And one of the franchises was Planet of the Apes. And I was hopeful, but skeptical. But, we've got a new movie. We got a new trailer. It's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and it's dropping next year. But a trailer came out a few weeks ago. So let's play some of the audio from this trailer, and then I want to get your thoughts on this.
When I sleep, I see strange things.
Memories?
Not memories. New things. I see everything.
That is not everything.
All right, Brian, go. I'm just kidding. Unless you have some thoughts.
Well, I I've really enjoyed the past Planet of the Apes movies, and my only question, wondering, is this, because it was sort of a trilogy of sorts, right? So now, is this a direct link to those films? It would seem so. The visual language seems to match up. We're just jumping ahead in the timeline, right? Getting closer to the original film.
That's my sense, yes.
Yeah, there's something about that I find really exciting, because I thought it was interesting to go back to the origins of all of this and seeing it from the human side, which of course I can relate to. Like, what if this slow takeover was sort of happening? What's that like? But I kind of like getting back to the original flavor there, where this is the apes world, and what is their relationship to these humans that don't act exactly like we do. I'm into it. I'm intrigued. How about you guys?
Yeah, Ray, what are your thoughts in general? First of all, have you seen the trilogy that concluded about 6 years ago?
No, see, this is where I was going to say, let me stand in for a portion of your audience. And so like you are the sole reason that I have this great respect for the original Planet of the Apes series. I saw the remake with the Lincoln statue.
Yes.
Right. And then I believe I saw the start of what I thought was another reboot that was planned to be a series. And for whatever reason, it was good, but it just wasn't my cup of tea, and I never turned back in. So where are we at in this series, or what does this one represent?
Okay, that's a good question. So yes, the Tim Burton film from 22 years ago, that's being ignored. And what you're referring to is in 2011, you had Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which was effectively a prequel / reboot of the franchise. So prequel in that it's set before the timeline of the original films. Reboot in that I don't think it's beholden to anything in those films. And so that allowed for a trilogy, which is specifically about the first ape who learned to talk. And so we go from apes gaining intelligence to the aftermath of humanity falling and apes taking over. And that trilogy spans roughly, I want to say 15 to 20 years. I think I'd have to look at whatever. I'm sure there's a chronology or something online, but it's a fantastic trilogy. And I would say, of the trilogies released between 2010 and 2019, probably the best trilogy within that window. If you were to compare it with, say, movies about wars in the stars, let's say. It's cohesive. It tells a story. It comes to a reasonable conclusion, right? But the beauty of it, and this is what I said way back in the day, I was like, the nice thing is that story ends, but this is a series about a planet, right? And so there's lots of stories to tell. And the original film, the 68 movie, I mean, that's set in the 30th century, right? So in other words, we got lots of there's a whole lot of runway before you even need to worry about where's Chuck Heston and all of this.
Okay.
And so this film is a new story set within the world of these previous three films, and it picks up. I don't know how it's the Wikipedia description says many generations. So I'm going to say like 40 to 50 years after.
Now, if I may play interviewer here, why do you think this concept is so fertile for what works about this? Because I think there's obviously been some there's analogy underneath it, right? Is that the driver that it can, or what do you think?
Well, Ray, I'm glad you asked. I think that there is an appeal. There's an enduring appeal, not just in Planet of the Apes, but in post-apocalyptic stories. We enjoy watching those. We enjoy vicariously experiencing the end of everything we know. And part of it is the what would I do of it.
Okay.
And I think the original Planet of the Apes, the first film, is a great what would you do movie where you are Chuck Heston in this scenario. Who are you? What are you, but I think underneath it, there's the opportunity for social commentary that you can play out as, oh, this is how apes are treating humans or humans are treating apes. But it's really drilling down into, how we treat ourselves. Right. And so there's an element of, I was going to say wish fulfillment. That's not right. It's of escapism, but woven through it. And I think the apes films, especially, they are at their best when they are dark, when they, when they take us to a place where it's not a happy ending, but it feels like a truthful ending.
Okay.
What I said about Rise of the Planet of the Apes when it came out, I'm like, it's an end of the world movie that makes you forget it's an end of the world movie.
Huh. Well, I did manage to find a Wonderful Life Connect. Now,
let's hear it.
You know everything about this project, so I assume you may be aware that Michael Wilson, the original screenwriter, who I guess was just coming back from kind of a McCarthy blacklist moment when he wrote The Planet of the Apes. Correct me if I got any of that part of it wrong, but
no, that's right.
So Capra brought him in at some point during the process to sort of, especially what would be the word, improve certain scenes and certain dialogue. And I have not been able to prove it yet, but there are references that lead me to believe that he was probably most responsible for George telling off Potter in that very memed, do you know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000 scene?
Yeah.
Those rabble you're talking about do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community, that whole thing. And that feels right to me. So anyway, and I don't know, I could feel a little of that DNA and that big ender to Planet of the Apes and the theme.
I think to that point, I mean, I think the original film, it benefited from, you had Rod Serling and Michael Wilson, right? They didn't work together. Wilson rewrote Serling, but regardless, you put those two artists together and you get something that is so evocative of their respective points of view, and yet it's something that, again, look, we're talking about this movie 55 years after it's released, and it's still it holds it has an iconography that people can understand even if they haven't seen the movie, very similar to It's a Wonderful Life in that regard.
Rod Serling is another one that I think I'm someday going to prove, but I haven't been able to prove it yet, that during that period of time when people had completely forgotten about It's a Wonderful Life, Rod was someone who saw it in the theater. I don't know how many people told me It's a Wonderful Life is your standard Capra movie, and then the last third of the movie becomes the best Twilight Zone you ever saw.
Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
He had 2 episodes. They're not well remembered because they weren't the better episodes of Twilight Zone, in which he has angels who need to execute a mission, and what they get is their wings. And this was at a time when nobody knew about this movie. So I don't know, something tells me he sat in a theater and he went, ooh, I want to do that Act 3 over and over and over again for other George Bailey type characters.
I didn't know that.
Anyway,
that's hilarious. But yeah, so that's where I'm at when it comes to this movie, where again, I think at this point Brian is like sick to death of hearing me talk about the Planet of the Apes films. But sorry, Brian. It looks like we're going to have more to talk about soon. But I think the trailer. So first of all, the film is directed by Wes Ball, who did the Maze Runner films, which I've not seen the whole way through, but I dipped in. My third kid, he was watching them a few weeks ago. I dipped in just because I was curious about his directing, and I'm like, well, he seems to know what he's doing. I don't know what his point of view is, and my feeling when it comes to Planet of the Apes is, underlying all of it, it has to be a dark story, because again, it's about the fall of man, and that's not, something we should be rooting for. And so that's all. When I look at this and I see, there's a sequence where you see human beings are being hunted. I'm like, okay, so we're moving closer to, that famous cornfield hunt. And that makes me excited. I do hope that I hope that this film has enough closure where they're not putting all their eggs on, we're going to do, 2 more of these or whatever.
Right.
That's my only concern, because Rise of the Planet of the Apes works as a oneer, as a one and done. And you're like, no, that's fine. They got 2 more out of it, which is great, But had they not, that would have been fine too. So that's probably my only concern with this.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm very curious. When does it come out?
So this is next summer. It's like Memorial Day weekend of next year. So Disney definitely putting a lot of faith into this. And I think I said this before. You know, the previous trilogy, the Caesar trilogy, the last two of which were directed by Matt Reeves. What I was really grateful for is that they were just successful enough to do another one. But they weren't so successful that like you had a bunch of studio people putting their mitts into the pie, you know?
Right.
And so that's kind of my hope with this one. I don't know how much they're spending, but I hope it's a reasonable enough amount where the bar for success isn't, if you don't make whatever, $700 million, it's a flop, you know?
Yeah.
Right. Which is, of course, that's what has been happening a lot.
Mm-hmm.
By way of, I find this interesting. Kevin Durand plays Proximus Caesar, a powerful chimpanzee ruler who leads a coastal clan of apes in search of human technology, right? And in the trailer, I'm pretty sure that's the character who's like, "What a lovely day," or whatever he says. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that Caesar, that name, is being corrupted. You know, because the through line of the previous films has been Caesar is sort of like the one person in the middle trying to hold it together, the world of apes and the world of men. And, ultimately he's a tragic figure because we know where things have to end up.
Right.
And I like that idea that as we move forward, whatever Caesar representative is gradually being forgotten. That intrigues me.
Yeah, dude, I'm glad. Well, if you're on board, then buckle up.
I'm on board so far. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Here's another sequel coming up. We got Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
Yeah.
So this is the sequel to Ghostbusters Afterlife, which was released just a couple years ago. So, and this one got delayed. It was supposed to come out this fall, but I think they've moved it probably because of the strike and everything else. But let's play some of the trailer for this one, and then we can talk about it.
For the first time in New York history, people froze to death in the middle of July.
What is it?
The death chill. The power to kill by fear itself. Your veins turn to rivers of ice. Your bones crack. And the last thing you see is your own tear ducts freezing up.
Like, literally scared to death? So cool.
So for this one, Ray, I can't remember. Where are you at when it comes to the Ghostbusters movies?
I love the Ghostbusters. I don't think you could have been of our generation growing up in the 80s and not been huge into Ghostbusters. I actually thought Ghostbusters 2, I recently learned, is not thought of well these days on the internet.
That's right. Yeah, right.
And I don't see that at all. I guess in the same way of Die Hard 2 and Home Alone 2, but I think much better. I just thought they brought everything I wanted from Ghostbusters 1 and did it in a different way that I just really loved. So, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's interesting about Ghostbusters 2, because first of all, I'm with you because I was like, oh, no, this is great. But Brian, you came to it later, as I recall.
Yes. 2.
And so you were a little more circumspect about the second one, is my recollection.
The first time I ever watched it all the way through was after watching 1. Like I watched 1, I'd seen it several times. It was on TV or something. And then it ended and 2 was starting. I was like, oh, let's do this. And I did personally, not having grown up with it, just being presented with them back to back like that, I felt a little bit of a decline, a little bit. But yeah, no, but it's funny. We talked about it on the show and we had a guest on, and I had no idea that Ghostbusters 2 specifically was his favorite movie of all time, as I was like being like, yeah, it's not that great. I remember it's one of those like traumatic things I still think about. But no,
the scene I think might be funnier than any single thing in Ghostbusters 1.
I'd be inclined to agree with that, to be honest. Yeah.
No, I remember being like, it's perfectly fine, but like back to back with the first one, I just didn't have the same feelings for it.
Well, definitely, and this is something you and I have talked about, where you feel the sense that we have to undo the happy ending of the first film.
That was kind of baffling to me. My memory, I've only seen it once, but my memory is after one ends with all of New York cheering Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, thank you. Like 2 starts off with them in court, like, what were you thinking? Like, like, you guys don't fight ghosts. Ghosts aren't real. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Well, it's a little bit like, we talked through Jaws 2 a couple of weeks ago, and it was sort of like when Brody in the second one is like, hey guys, there's a shark, and they're like, yeah, sure, shark, whatever.
Sure,
like, dude, you went through this like a few years ago, right?
Right. Right.
So my experience, and Ray, I don't know if this was your experience, but movie 1 came out, and we rolled right into the cartoon show, and then a couple of years later was the second one, and I remember, for me, it wasn't, I didn't feel that 5-year gap because there was that cartoon show, and Ghostbusters was so present for the second half of the 80s. But I did think like, oh, they're like ignoring the cartoon. And I remember that, you know what I mean? Like,
I think even at that age, I wasn't into, I only expected that the movies would carry on each other's storylines. I did not expect that a book or a cartoon show. I never thought the Star Trek cartoon, I wasn't going to hold the rest of the series.
Well, that's your loss, Ray.
That's what I hear.
But yeah, well, that sense of like, oh, actually, we went out of business after the first movie and this and that. And I remember being like, well, yeah, you don't have to do that. I remember thinking that. But I've always liked it. I've always liked Ghostbusters too. So when it came, when they did the 2016 movie, and this is like such a minefield of a conversation, my issue was not that they had an all-female cast, but I remember, and I said it on this show, my issue was, why reboot it when you've got a perfectly good framework to operate within?
And the improv-ness. I think if online hate, if any of the arguments get me, it's just that it wasn't very good. Like the improv was not a great formula for what they were.
Yeah, and this is a discussion we've had where I think the original films work because it's a quote unquote real world where you have people who are humorous within it, as opposed to a humorous world with humorous characters in it. And I've I'm repeating myself for people who've been listening for a while, but like in the 2016 movie, Kristen Wiig tells Andy Garcia's the mayor. She's like, "You're going to be like the mayor from Jaws," and he's like, "Nobody compares me to the mayor from Jaws." And I'm like, "Yeah,
right.
that's like a movie line. It's not a way somebody would actually react, right?" Whereas the original films, both of them work because, Lenny, I forget what's the actor's name? He passed away. He's playing it straight, and that's what makes like Venkman funny, Walter Peck works as a foil because he's serious about what he wants to do, but Bill Murray can say this man has no dick,
Right.
Yes.
So with that in mind, so we have this new film, Frozen Empire, coming up. But I mean, what did you think of Ghostbusters Afterlife?
All right, so I will answer that by saying that Jason Reitman almost instantly became one of my favorite writer-directors from the time I saw Thank You for Smoking. And then when he followed that up with Juno and Up in the Air, I was like, I'm going to see every movie this guy ever does eagerly. He joined that club. It's a very short list. I'm excited to see where this guy's going. And I haven't really liked anything he's done since Young Adult. That's the last one that I felt was of that level. And then I don't know. I guess he hit a point in his career where he was looking to try other things. But then when I knew he was going to be taking over this franchise for at least one movie, I thought, okay, so two things I love coming together. There's no way this is not going to be amazing. And we used that word earlier a couple times, vapor. I remember the broad outlines. I remember a little bit about a couple of the characters. I was reminded when I saw them in this trailer, like, oh, okay, those people are back. But I couldn't really describe in any detail what I saw or any moments that I want to recount that were hilarious to me or whatever it might be. How did y'all feel? I guess you reviewed it. I missed that episode. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
Brian, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say because I'm slightly more positive, but not far removed from where you are. Like I grew up with Ghostbusters iconography and thinking it was cool, but it wasn't as beloved for me as it was for you guys. I just kind of missed it in a way. But so it's not like just seeing those characters like warms my heart like some other series might. And so with this one, I remember thinking like, well, that was fun, but I can't say I'm like in love with the new characters. I couldn't even really tell you what they were like. I don't remember what their personalities were, save for the girl. I remember thinking it was fun. Like, and her and Paul Rudd's dynamic was kind of fun at times. But otherwise, it was something that I probably smiled while I was watching it, but instantly was like, so what are we doing for dinner? You know, and haven't thought about it since. Zachy?
You know, I think for me, so it's not a movie I've rewatched since it came out, but I enjoyed it every time I watched it. I ended up watching it 3 times around when it came out. I went to the press screening and then I went to the theater again and I watched it at home with the wife and I enjoyed it each time. So I was excited for this because I was like the world. I enjoy this world. Like I'm excited to go back into this world. I like this trailer. Oh, so first of all, Jason Reitman is not directing this one. Gil Keenan is directing it, who co-wrote the first film. So I think they're just swapping off.
He's co-writer, though. I saw Jason's co-writing with Gil. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So Reitman is still involved, but they're swapping directing duties. But what I like about this trailer, first of all, I'm glad that Paul Rudd is back because I feel like he was, of the new cast, he was the best part of the first film, of the earlier film, I should say.
Yeah.
So that's important. And I'm glad that they got the OGs back. I know Bill Murray was putting up such a stink for freaking decades about not coming back, and now it's like once they uncorked it, he's like, all right, whatever, fine, I'm back. Right? Like, I mean, he spent like, I don't know how long, 25 years or whatever, not wanting to be in it. But anyway,
have you heard too that Ghostbusters 2 hate that I was referring to? He was like first and foremost there. It was like the reason he would never do another one. Is that what you guys have gotten?
I've heard that. Yeah. I mean, he didn't want to do.
Now that they uncorked it, he's just like, I'll show up for any of these. It's like, really? You couldn't have done something.
I mean, for his cameo in the first film, I mean, it was probably like an afternoon.
Right.
And so maybe, it's just worth his while to just show up and, at this stage of his life, maybe that works for him. But anyway, I mentioned the cartoon show earlier, which I loved. I really enjoyed the cartoon show and I think it holds up still even now. And what I like about this, based on the trailer, it looks like an episode of the cartoon show where they're kind of breaking out of some of the mythological, the cement, if you will, of like, oh, we got to do Gozer and we got to, it's like, no, that there's a whole world of weird shit that Ghostbusters can be about. Right. And so I think there's an opportunity here to really, and I don't want to be like mercenary about it, but to really like, if they're trying to set something in place that can last, well, then you have to expand the types of stories you can tell. And that's what I feel here, the cartoon show would do all kinds of stories, and they obviously they're Saturday morning cartoon or whatever, but they did really clever stuff. Like there's this one episode where the Ghostbusters end up destroying Christmas because they end up inadvertently ending up in the past, and they see these ghosts harassing this old man, and so they trap them. And those are the ghosts that haunted Ebenezer Scrooge.
That's funny.
Right? And it's like really clever. It's like a clever idea for an episode, and they play it straight within the world of the show, And that's the type of stuff I would love to see in a Ghostbusters sort of expanded universe,
I gotta say, I kind of agree with that. Like, what I liked about this, what really made me perk up a little bit, was it reminding me of Ghostbusters 2 in a way, where the thing I liked about 2, I liked the whole idea of like, oh, there's a haunted painting. That's interesting. And then there's There's like goo that's running under the city because everybody's so angry, you know? And I got that sense from this where they're like, oh, people are being literally frozen from fear. I was like, love it. That's fun. You know, like it feels from the same sort of cut from the same cloth of the second one, where it's like a little more fun, kind of maybe like you said, like the cartoon vibe. And I like that. And I want to see goofy stories like that. The only hesitation I have is when I'm looking at it, I can't say this team makes me very excited.
Yeah.
Because I get going back to how I felt about the first one, like I don't like even remember them. Like I don't remember. You know, you think of the original Ghostbusters, you're like, there's the brainy one, there's the cynic, there's, you know, and
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go, make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal.
I don't really have that grasp on this team or really even those actors. So like when I see Paul Rudd, there's a little part of me, it's like, well, okay, he'll be there. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And it's a lot of people too, because you see it and it's like the mother, you know, played by Carrie Coon, I think was in a suit. Paul Rudd's in a suit. The kids are in a suit. I'm sort of like, what is this team? I don't really have my head wrapped around.
That's my question. And actually, like from the trailer, you get Patton Oswalt in there, you have Kumail Nanjiani, and there's a part of me, it's like, are they bringing these guys in to sort of become the team?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't mind the kids, by the way. I don't mind if they're younger at all. I just want to
that's fine.
Be able to understand them and be excited to see them.
And I mean, I think the reason those first two films work is obviously the banter between the group, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's extraordinary because you watch just movie one taken on its own, you buy their friendship like right away. And that's what makes that movie work. And I think that's why people, you know, especially if you're a kid, when you watch Ghostbusters 2, it's like, oh, I get to hang out with my friends again. So definitely not feeling that yet, but I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. And by the way, we're talking about William Atherton as Walter Peck. He's back in this one.
Yeah.
So you know, hopefully more Dickless jokes.
Patton Oswalt, I do think that was the number one thing that jumped out of my head watching the trailer was he's a good addition. Especially if they're trying to create this universe where, as inevitably, sadly, some of the original Ghostbusters start to die or just simply refuse to come back. They want enough of a goodwill from these movies, right, to get themselves where they can continue. And I think he's a good addition on that front. So,
yeah, and I think the approach they took with Afterlife in terms of continuing the world of the films, that was a good one. And we can get into quibbles about the film itself, but I think that was smart. And again, going back to what you're saying, I think that's where the Paul Feig movie fell down, in my opinion. So the question is exactly what you're saying. As Bill Murray's like, okay, now I'm done. Okay. Is there still enough there for us to want to come back to visit the firehouse, irrespective of who's in it, you know?
Right.
But that one comes out March of next year. Another movie that comes out just a month before that. Now, Brian, I can already tell how excited you are for this one. Also from Sony, we have Madam Web. Oh boy. Okay, let's play some of the audio from this head scratcher of a thing.
I've seen that man before. So who is he? Ezekiel Sims. He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Wait, I recognize you. You live in my building.
You're the paramedic.
Yeah, you almost ran me over. You don't think this is weird? How we're all connected?
It's honestly like the least weird thing that's happened all day.
So as soon as I saw this trailer, my one and only thought was, I can't wait for Brian to be utterly baffled by whatever the hell this is.
Guilty as charged? No, I mean, I'll just start by saying I'm not familiar with this character, so there wasn't any of that.
Hold on, Brian, let me pause. Nobody's familiar with this character. Don't worry, you're not alone. You represent the great mass of humanity.
Okay, fair. I also, Man, Marvel, I know the narrative at the moment is Marvel is struggling a little bit, but let's put that aside and talk about the decade plus of successes they had. This movie makes me realize that Marvel made it look easy. Right? I mean, you're just like, well, yeah, and Spider-Man's in it, and it's going to be really, I'm going to laugh, and I'm going to feel the peril, and I'm going to, there'll be a challenge, and I'll be excited, and then it'll be over, and I'll watch it again, and it's a new movie that I'm going to love for the next, 20 years. And then you watch something like Morbius, and Morbius was one of those things where I'm like, no, I didn't hate Morbius. I just felt literally nothing for it. Like
it would have been better if you hated it, because then
exactly. If it had been bad, it would have been better. It was just so milquetoast and like just nothing, and I've told stories about how I left. I discovered how to order popcorn from my movie app during that movie. And so watching Madam Web, I'm like, oh, what is up over there? Like what? I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just felt like Dakota Johnson feels a little sleepy, if I'm being honest. Like her performance, or maybe it's her voiceover. There's just nothing. And whatever threat she's up against in this, the villain who's presented, it's just like, I've seen this. I've seen this. That's what we talked about it like 2 episodes ago, I think, about the Marvels. And I was kind of like mixed positive to it. And everybody's been so harsh on it. And I was like, why was I so positive on it? And I was like, it just felt different. It felt different than the other superhero stuff I've seen lately. And this one feels like 15 years behind, And so I was just like, I've seen this. There's nothing here that's looks new or exciting or intriguing to me. And so I'm like, I don't know why I would want to watch this. I don't know. What about you guys?
Ray?
Pass.
Takes a sip of water.
Strategery. So the Madam Web character in the Spider-Man comic books, she's this old lady in a wheelchair.
Okay.
Or like a not like a wheelchair, like a weird sci-fi wheelchair type thing. Yeah. And she's blind, but she has visions of the future. So occasionally she'll contact Spider-Man and be like, hey, this thing is going to happen.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So Sony, having the Spider-Man rights, are like, Marge with her Chanel dress. Like, what else can we do? Right?
And I'm becoming like the women at the country club.
Yeah. So when you look at the cast list for this thing, okay, so you got Dakota Johnson as Madam Web, who again is not like, to call her a secondary character is too generous. She's like a 5th tier character. If people know her at all, it would be because she would show up every once in a while in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon that aired on Fox. But you've got Sydney Sweeney as Julia Carpenter, who is Spider-Woman. You've got Celeste O'Connor as Maddie Franklin, who's another Spider-Woman. You've got Isabella Merced as Anya Corazon, who's another character called Aranya, right? So in other words, what they're trying to do is just see how many franchises they can squeeze out. Because each of those 3 characters, I guarantee you, they're hoping, we can get a movie out of her, and a movie out of her. And this, again, I think the worst thing possible that could have happened in terms of the Spider-Man rights is that the Venom movies have been successful.
Yeah.
Because that's what got it into their heads, right? Like I put the Spider-Verse movies in a separate basket because I think those are incredible.
Yep.
And those are unique unto themselves. But what's going to keep Sony holding on to these Spider-Man rights with their just fingernails dug in is the prospect of another Venom. But the thing is, Venom, which I'm not crazy about those movies, but the character has real world, familiarity on his own.
Wait, what do you mean? People know. Yeah.
People know him. If you have a T-shirt with Venom on it, people will recognize him. You know what I mean?
I'll also say in favor of those movies, even though I'm not crazy about them, and I really dislike the second one. But they, speaking to what I said earlier, I mean, they have a personality.
Yes.
They are different. And so at least even when the third one comes out, I'll still go not with the same feelings I had for Morbius or anything, because I'm like, well, it's going to be wacky. Like, this thing has its own voice, and at least it's got that going for me, so I don't know what to expect. And that's I mean that as a compliment.
I agree with that. The other thought I had watching this trailer is like, I haven't seen enough of Dakota Johnson outside of like the 50 Shades movies.
Yeah, same, I think.
Like, I don't know if she's a lead. That's also my thought.
Yeah, I don't know either. Maybe in the right roles.
Yeah,
but she doesn't pop off the screen, at least in this trailer. And the little I've seen of 50 Shades, like on HBO or something, like clips, like she just seems to be sort of. It's like one of those sort of Cypher character situations, which is not her fault. I mean, I think that is the character of that movie or those books.
Yeah.
But they're just observing everything around them, and I don't know what they're contributing.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, and this is, I mean, we're gonna be discussing this movie when it comes out. So, like, it is what it is. But just from the trailer, I'm not seeing the driving artistic need. And I realize as I'm talking, I'm like, well, yeah, what?
It's funny because you could laugh at what you're saying, but I also completely agree. Like, why do I need to see this? And this isn't just like superhero movie number 12. You can skip this and just wait for the next one. Like, why should I not skip this one?
Like here's what I'll say. Like, because I think it's coming next year. God damn, they got a lot of these coming next year because they got Kraven, and I think Venom 3 is also next year.
Dude, Kraven,
right?
that trailer also, I was like, all right. Like, just no personality.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, again, it's Marge's Chanel dress, right?
Yeah.
How many? So yeah, okay. Well, that's us on Madam Web, the trailer.
Wait, Ray, did you say? I don't know if you said.
He passed.
Passed.
Is Dakota Johnson your cousin?
Yeah, exactly. I'm too close to it. I can't talk about it. Yeah.
All right, one last trailer for today, and this just dropped mere hours ago. It's Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F.
Watch your ass out there, okay?
I'm gonna be fine. They love me in Beverly Hills.
Detective Foley, you ever read your own files? Shootouts, start of the piece, a lot.
Please tell me you didn't get arrested again.
Twice, but I broke out.
Okay, so let me first say I think Beverly Hills Cop 3, which is 30 years old now, right? I think.
What? 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? Wasn't it 90? It was 94. So by the time this comes out, it will in fact be 30 years. Yeah. I think Beverly Hills Cop 3 is a terrible movie.
Yes.
So let me put that out on Front Street.
Yeah.
However, this trailer started and I was like, I want to watch this movie tomorrow.
Same.
Dude, same. 100%. Actually, okay, so my brother and I said this earlier, I think, we saw Oppenheimer. And we were like, man, what a movie. And it just feels so different. And we're so glad that a movie like this could make $1 billion. And Dan, my brother, said to me, I don't know if I'm getting older, but like so many of the movies coming out now just don't appeal to me. Like the trailers don't, like he was thinking about the trailers before the movies. Like they don't, light my fire. And we were talking about why is that? And I was like, I don't know. I think they just all kind of look the same. And kind of going back to what I said earlier, where I don't think the characters are really considered enough. It's more like we'll come up with an actor and put them through situations and they think the situations will be enough. So anyway, then I wake up and I see this Beverly Hills Cop trailer and I was like, that's what I want to see. like going directly to, well, of course he's a character and I know we have a relationship with him. We've seen all the movies. So I'm happy to see this character that I want to spend time with again. But also the action, my complaint was, I think a lot of the action is so visual effects driven that it just feels inevitably flat. So when you see a Mission Impossible trailer and you see Tom Cruise driving a motorcycle off a cliff, I'm like, holy crap. Like that feels so different because I know there wasn't some sort of, volume effect with a guy just standing on a treadmill pretending to, to do something. Like there's a visceralness to it that really just subconsciously you react to. So when I'm watching this and it's a guy that I like, a personality that I like, and I'm watching like a car fall off a parking garage to get, snapped in, and held by a cable, and a helicopter flying between buildings down a street, I'm like, it made me sit up. It made me sit up straight. I was like, that looks thrilling. And like, I feel like there's a lack of thrilling going on right now, despite people's best efforts. This to me is visually thrilling, and I want it now. I'm ready.
Ray, what'd you think?
And you didn't even need like any of those guest appearances from the other movies, right? I was just in from like Eddie Murphy as Axel again, and you're right, and the action felt similar to the way it used to be done. That works so well in that. Man, the original Beverly Hills Cop, and even to some extent Part 2, I think I was actually closer to in my youth than Ghostbusters. And I'm not sure why, but something hit with that. I used to have older cousins who were so in love with the Eddie Murphy era of Saturday Night Live that they would come to family parties and they would do bits that he had just done on that weekend's SNL. So that's what I'd watch my cousins do, and they'd bring the whole family, just be cracking up laughing. And so I don't know, maybe I just had to connect. And the thing about Eddie Murphy of that era is that there are some actors who somehow like what we think is their own personality. They've found some version of humanity that we just want to see in different variations over and over again. I don't want to see Humphrey Bogart have this huge range of types of characters, right? I want to see him do versions of Bogey. And what happened with Eddie is that the Eddie Murphy Raw guy and the 48 Hours Eddie Murphy and so on and so forth, I think what went wrong with that third movie is he like stopped being able to be that guy, and my perception was he went to Hollywood and he could no longer be that guy again. And I mean, I'm sure there's a few exceptions, but largely he's played this sort of different type, and I just miss original Eddie, and that's what it feels like I may be getting here.
Original Eddie.
Yeah. Man, they screwed up with that third movie because this should have been his Mission Impossible franchise if they were thinking in Hollywood like they do now. We lost so many great movies with that character. That should have happened.
That's such a good point, right? Because the premise was sturdy enough to easily keep coming back for another 3 or 4, right? And I think it just the third movie happened to coincide with just a general downturn in Eddie Murphy, the perception, right? Because Vampire in Brooklyn, wasn't that around then? And Harlem Nights, like it was, that Eddie Murphy was pissed at SNL because David Spade did that Hollywood Minute, and it was just a picture of Eddie Murphy. He goes, "Look, a falling star."
Right.
Yeah.
And you definitely see that, and yet you watch this trailer, and it's Eddie Murphy and Paul Reiser in a car, and you're like, well, Eddie Murphy stepped through a time portal from 1994, while Paul Reiser experienced those 30 years, right? I mean, he is remarkably well preserved, is my point, right? And so that it's like, dude, like, let's do this, and I hope it's more in line with 1 and 2. It's funny because I haven't revisited those films in a little bit, so I think I have a greater affinity for the second one, but I mean, I need to revisit them. But just the Tony Scott direction, it really sticks out to me, and just kind of creating a world that is quote unquote real, but you have a humorous character in it, like Ghostbusters.
Yep, 100%.
And the third one, I feel like that's where it faltered, where it leaned a little too heavy into the comedic side. And so it's a tricky balance, but honestly, watching this trailer and just hearing the Axel Foley theme, I mean, it's like, man, nostalgia is a hell of a drug, I gotta say,
It's funny too. Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yep.
I don't know why, but sometimes I can be kind of hit or miss with him. But in this trailer, I was like, oh, yeah, he feels like he was a part of all of these. I don't know how to explain it, but he just slipped right in, and he feels like the right personality to deal with that character.
Yeah.
I just hope there's a scene where when he meets Axel Foley, he's like, I knew you were Axel Foley because you're an orphan and I was an orphan. We're both orphans.
It's with his.
Yeah. You know what's, by the way, real quick, I watched the trailer with Amina this morning and I was like, hey, look, he's in it, pointing to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And she goes, oh, hey, it's the kid from Third Rock from the Sun, said my wife in 2023 about Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
That is hilarious. Well, hey, that was when it made the impression. That's when he imprinted on her.
For a lot of people, yeah.
I didn't feel I needed. No, I mean, I'm into it completely, so I'm just complaining for complaint's sake because it's fun. I don't necessarily need this character to be coming back to Beverly Hills for the 4th time. Like, I'd be down to see an Axel Foley movie in Detroit or anywhere, you know? And I wonder if they'll extend it past this. Is that why they've got his name in the subtitle so they can just start making Axel Foley movies instead of...
That's a great point. Wow, I didn't even think about that.
Well, if it 30 years later, we're finally getting that string of movies that we should have gotten. I'm into it.
Yeah.
That being said, I am so, and maybe without reason, but I'm just so pissed off that this is a Netflix movie because I want to watch this in the theater. And if Netflix does not put this out in the theater, I will be furious, honestly.
If they put, even if it's just for a week, like whatever they're doing with Maestro or whatever, like right. I will go. I will watch this in a theater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the one pebble in my shoe when it comes to all this. Because I think with Coming to America, remember they dropped that on Amazon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Paramount is like hemorrhaging cash. That's like the issue.
Right.
That's why they got Netflix on board, because apparently like this was like fully developed by Netflix. There's no Paramount logo in the trailer even.
Oh, wow.
Right. They basically just licensed it to them. So this is like, that's fine as long as it gets made. But I am like, come on, these are some of your big brands. The other thing, by the way, actually, in terms of the development of this film, it's directed by Mark Malloy, whose work I'm not particularly familiar with. But at one time, it was going to be Adil Al-Arbi and Bilal Fallah, who did Bad Boys 3,
which we liked.
Which we really liked. And they also they were developing this, and then they left this because development was taking a long time, and they did the Batgirl film.
Yeah.
So that also doubly sucks.
Yeah.
Because they didn't get this or that.
You know what I'll say, though, by the way, speaking of it coming out in theaters, I do wonder if this might be an Indiana Jones situation where even people our age, I think it's probably like a 1 in 3 or something of people who not just remember it, but maybe or have seen it, but actually remember it.
Sure.
And have like an affinity for it. So I don't know that this was ever going to be like $100 million grossing movie, but
okay. But that's true. Look at, based on his trailer, I'm guessing they spent, I don't know, somewhere between $50 and $80 million.
Sure.
Right. And if I'm wrong, somebody can correct me later, but the problem with Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny was that they spent, Avengers Endgame money on it.
100%.
It wasn't the movie itself,
Yeah.
Barring that ridiculous outlay, it did okay, except that they spent too much for it. So that's I think the whole, if they kept the budget tight for this, then it would have done fine.
I think so. Well, and what I'd love to see these streamers do is what they did for Killers of the Flower Moon, like have it come out like, no, this is going to be out there for public consumption in theaters for a while.
Yeah.
But then it'll come immediately to this service, so then you get that this is a theater movie. It is important. And you get that value for their catalog down the line. But, give it a shot out in theaters. Why not? Why not make some back and then put it on your service maybe a little quicker than some other movies might go?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So this one is due out next summer. No date yet, but I think, Brian, we can be reasonably certain that we will do a commentary track for the original Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, that'd be fantastic! Yeah,
nice.
Right? That feels like a safe bet. But that's it for our trailers this week. I know we've gotten a lot of requests from people who are like, "Oh, when are you going to talk about this?" And it's just been piling up because we've had so much other stuff to discuss. So this has allowed us to clear out the cabinet, so to speak. But hey, maybe we said something y'all disagree with. If we have, you can let us know. You can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. Ray, talk up George Bailey Was Never Born, and you've got some other stuff out in the world too. So I'd love for you to get people wise to everything you have going on.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I just actually kind of want to like humbly apologize to your audience because you two are so good together that you don't need anyone else like coming in, and anyone else sort of automatically interrupts this great, amazing flow that you guys have. But I just enjoy listening to you so much. So
thank you.
Anyway, but if people want to know more about George Bailey Was Never Born, they can go to the slightly more positive sounding SaveGeorgeBailey.com. Where they'll learn a lot more and how to join the mission if they're interested in any of the issues connected to it. And they can listen to all the episodes there and be directed to all the places where you get your podcast. Unfortunately, this is only available where you get your podcasts. So all those places where you don't get your podcasts, you're not going to find it.
Sorry.
I've been trying out that joke on a couple shows. I feel like it's pretty good. But and then thanks for pointing out. I worked for 5 years on a film documentary directed by Barbara Koppel that is definitely the documentary I'm proudest of and have the most of myself in. And it followed civil rights leaders through the Trump presidency, and it's called Gumbo Coalition, and it dropped on Max about a month ago. So I'd say if George Bailey and Wonderful Life is not your cup of tea, go on over to Max and check that one out because. It's this era that you thought you knew from a very different perspective, and it'll renew some of your hope that there are actually real leaders out there who are doing things not for themselves but for the greater good of all of us. So
that's fantastic. You're putting so much positivity out there. I really love it.
I'm past my era where I'm just like finding anti-heroes and bad guys and trying to expose them because that jumped the shark. We all know how many bad guys there are out there. I'm done with it. I want some heroes.
I love it. I mentioned Gumbo Coalition in my class. As it happens, it dropped on Max like the week that I was discussing documentaries in my alternative cinema class, and so I got to be like, yeah, my friend from film school has got this movie. I got to get a little bit of your reflected glory. So
thank you for doing that, dude. I really appreciate it.
That was great. Brian, what about you? What do you have going on?
As always, Young Jedi Adventures episodes you can catch on Disney Junior and Disney Plus.
There we go. And as for me, you can find me online at Zacky's Corner. That's whether you're on X or Threads or Instagram. That's the handle I am under. And got some cool articles coming up, including a look back at Tombstone, celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, which we may be talking about on this podcast too. Maybe.
Guys, my wife is going to kill me if I don't mention our new podcast. I just realized. So
yes, do it, please.
Thank you. And also because I'm very excited about it, but it slipped my mind. So she mentioned the last episode of George Bailey Was Never Born ended up somehow becoming essentially a bit of a memoir for us and a look at kind of our dynamic and our recent problems and how they sort of connected with Wonderful Life. So for anyone who wants to just try out that episode 10, great. But if you like that and you want to jump off from that, we're going to do kind of a weekly series where due to the fact that I'm in nonfiction and she's in nonfiction, we meet a lot of diverse, interesting folks every week just doing development on stuff. And we're trying to entrap one of them each week to do about a 30-minute conversation with us. And then you'll hear us kind of set up the conversation. So it's called Everybody Has a Podcast with Ruth and Ray.
Nice. And so episode 10 of George Bailey Was Never Born is like the backdoor pilot.
That's exactly how I described it to Ruth.
That's perfect.
I think that's why she signed on to it. It's like, okay.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Ray, for joining us. And I hope it's not another 8 years before you come back and join us on the show. I hope we'll be able to count you in much sooner.
Well, if it is, I'll spend the next 8 years looking forward to it.
There you go. Thanks, everybody, for listening. On behalf of my partner, Brian Hall, and our guest, Ray Nowosielski, my name is Zaki Hassan. Catch you next time. Thanks, folks.
Welcome, friends. It's the Movie Film Podcast. The Movie Film Podcast. Enjoy the show. Zaki and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.